Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Jake Free. I'm one of the environmental services supervisors here in Land Services. And my role is generally the planning and zoning administrator. And that's probably principally what my role here is. And then we do water quality, aquatic invasive species prevention, and things related to that as well. I also have Thomas Roloff next to me, as you can see on the camera for those of you that are joining in by video. Thomas is one of our environmental services specialists. He's going to be helping monitor to see if there's any chat questions, to see if anybody's hands are raised, or if there's any other questions that come up that I'm not seeing because I'm generally running the PowerPoint presentation. There was, so he'll be here for the duration. As far as who's speaking this morning, you're generally stuck with me. I'm sorry, but we've got about 2.5, almost 3 hours here. We've got a break built into it, so we've got a variety of topics that I think are going to pique folks' interest here and be a good presentation this morning. I want to thank everyone who responded to our reach out and letter. We really appreciate it a lot. Our goal is to make sure that we're serving well, that we continue to be Minnesota's favorite place, and we want to be as responsive as we can whenever we get comments or questions. And we think this will be a good presentation this morning. We've had this kind of workshop at least, I would say, 8 to 10 years now. It started out just focused on contractors, primarily to ensure that their practices on the ground are meeting the ordinance requirements and giving them new information about what's going on. That's since evolved over the last couple of years to be a little bit more inclusive towards a lot of different information we have. So I think you'll find that there are some topics that we're going to chat about this morning that you're very interested in, want to dive into the weeds a lot on, whereas some other topics you may feel that it maybe isn't quite of interest, but will pique other people's interest. So I'm hoping between all the topics this morning that we hit something that you're really interested in and can find value in. As far as what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint, get that started. All right, so as far as how we see the morning generally running here, we're going to start with some introductions and overview. We're going through that right now. We are going to hit it decently hard on the residential stormwater management requirements in Crow Wing County and go through an example. If we don't quite make an hour, that's okay. We'll flex that out. We are then going to talk about some floodplain regulations and how that relates to construction and things you can do in the landscape. We're going to take a short break after that for about 15 minutes. We're going to come back in, talk about some of our basic shoreland rules. We've done that routinely in the past at different presentations. I think it's always good to just review that and make sure everyone is on the same page in terms of what's allowed. We're going to go over a little bit on the public hearing process for those interested in how this variance process works and the timeline for that and kind of how that goes. We'll take a little bit of time after that to go through some basics of our GIS Interactive map and how you can navigate through that. For some of you, that's old hat. For some, that hopefully is interesting. We did have our county board recently approve some ordinance revisions. We're going to go through, it could take a while to go through those, but I'm going to try and just touch a little bit on each one of the items that's been approved and work through that. And then it's nice that we have great partners with the Soil and Water Conservation District able to join us this morning the end to discuss where their role fits with land use, water quality, any grants they have available, and how their services intersect with the county. So I'm looking forward to, again, a good presentation this morning. Just a couple of reminders to those who are new to Teams, or those who just need a bit of a refresher. If you're joining by computer or a screen where you can see the PowerPoint and you aren't able to just listen, but you can see this as well. If you have a question, you're going to want to make sure you go to the top of your screen, assuming you're on a desktop and not a smartphone. And there is that icon bubble for chat. Once you click that, it'll open a chat window. If you go down below where you can see my cursor, you can type in a message. Thomas will watch out for that if there's something that he needs to let me know about, where, hey, there's a quick question on something, we can do that. It's a nice feature. And if you just want to chat with each other, no problem. It's a chat room, so you can throw some ideas around if you want. If you have a question, again, and if you're not just joining by phone, you can click the icon at the top of the screen with the smiley face and the hand, and then there's some gestures you can see. The one with the hand raise, in yellow, you can click that, and it'll pop up by your name, and that'll be a way that Thomas will flag some questions that are coming in, and then we'll call your name and say, hey, looks like we have a question from whoever, and then see if we can answer those questions. So you can jump in whenever. Okay. And then if you're interested in seeing who else is in the room, or if your friend or someone else who's curious is there, you can always click the list of participants at the top of the screen as well to see if they're in and see who else is here. I think we had over 50 say that they would like to join. When I started the meeting, I think we were at 20 something, but I expect that list to grow as we move forward here. If you're just joining by phone, you can simply comment by just jumping in and saying, hey, say Jake, I've got a question for you, real quick. That's really the only way we can do it by phone. So no problem if you're using a phone. If you're not using the phone only though, it's probably best if you can just raise your hand. And always, of course, when you're not speaking, we ask that you mute yourself. The way you're going to do that is this icon in the upper right-hand side of the screen with a microphone on it. If it has a slash through it, great, that means you're muted. If you'd like to speak, make sure you unmute that icon so that you're able to speak. One other thing about hand raising, when you're done with your comments or your question, make sure you click the hand raise icon again so your hand goes down. If you forget, not a big deal, we'll look at that. So that's a little bit of the introductions. I think what I would like to do now, in order to test the system out a bit, everyone here is in here for a different reason. Let's check your savviness to this interactive feature. Why don't we have 3 folks out there maybe volunteer to say what you're looking forward to learning this morning at this session the most. So if you can, I'll just call the first 3 out. Who has it? You can use the hand raise feature, and we'll see if we can test that out. So whenever anyone is ready, let's see if we can get the first 3. All right, I see a guest from Sunshine Gardens. Go ahead.
Yes, I have Sunshine Gardens Nursery and Landscaping, and we do plantings and we grow native plants for other landscapers as well as the plants we do. And I'm just looking to learn a little bit more about what might be the changes in the county shoreland ordinance and that sort of thing, so I can keep up on it with my business, Sunshine Gardens.
Excellent. Thank you for that comment.
Oh, my name is Bonnie Hineker, by the way.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, who else has anything they're looking to get out of today's session? Well, I won't press. It's open to get 3, but we will move on. Like I said, I think everyone's looking for some different types of information, so we'll just keep moving. Okay. Just as a primer for today's discussion, we have our mission, vision, and values. Wanting to be Minnesota's favorite place, serve well, deliver value, drive those results, and be responsible, treat people right, build a better future. That's really what we want to do. Ultimately, we're looking for great water quality and a good quality of life. That's why we think we're Minnesota's favorite place. We do so by having data-driven results, and we're performance-based. Our ordinance is highly performance metric, and we do things in land services that are generally data-driven to try and improve the quality of our lives. We believe in watershed protection. We think we have good water planning and great partners to execute it. And we have excellent partners with our lake associations, lake improvement districts, et cetera, that are out there monitoring our lakes and rivers, providing those assessments, getting that data, and helping us understand where those trends are. And we appreciate all the customer feedback we get, qualitative feedback, and stakeholder feedback. That all feeds into the model to create a higher quality of life with excellent water quality. So at the end of the day, we're going to be talking about the nuts and bolts of these plans and how they work, but we should always be thinking about the fact that we're trying to get a higher quality of life. All right. Now we're going to break this down in terms of a little bit of an organizational chart of our focus this morning. This is the Land Services Department in Crow Wing County. We have other departments as well, Highway Department, Community Services, Attorney's Office, things like that. Under Land Services, there's a couple of business managers that help organize, streamline, provide data, keep processes going, things like that. And then underneath that, we have what we call offices or specialized areas underneath Land Services. We've got a couple of areas of environmental services. One deals with our landfill, tax forfeited land management, and forestry services. Ryan Simonson heads that area, and that's one area of focus. The other one is the area that we're going to be concentrating on today: planning and zoning, water plan, aquatic invasive species protection, and survey coordination. Principally today, we're going to focus on planning and zoning. We do have other presentations on AIS and water planning, but today we're really going to focus on that. The other areas of our office are customer service. They do vitals, public hearing assistance, marriage license, birth certificates, taxes paid, basically everything. It's a one-stop shop here. Not going to focus as much on this area except for that public hearing assistance side. We also have our assessing area, tax calculations, property valuations and assessments, and then our recording area where documents are recorded, E911 addressing. So again, I'm going to focus on environmental services and a little bit on our customer service side for the public hearing. So that hopefully drives down the context of why we're here. What do? We do land use planning. We review permits and we approve them where they're required. We look at stormwater management plans where they're required and we approve those. We administer the septic program on behalf of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. That's the subsurface treatment systems. Where we have the authority, we administer the Wetland Conservation Act, which is a state of Minnesota law. And we enforce all of those 1 through 5. So we have an enforcement side as well. We help people with public hearings. And we also have water quality initiatives, water planning, and AIS prevention. So that's what, when we say what we do, that section of environmental services, that's what we're doing. Where do we do those things? We do our septic administration everywhere except for Irondale and Crow Wing. And we do almost all the small cities, but all the bigger cities, they have their own authority for septic. For the wetland regulations, we have the entire county except for 4 or 5 small cities that choose to consult. For land use permitting and zoning, we have the authority in all of the townships except Irondale and Crow Wing. We don't do any of the cities. They have their own permitting system, etc. And then, of course, we have a solid waste program. Actually, my area, we do enforce the solid waste violations, except in Irondale and Crow Wing and none of the cities, although they can ask us to help if needed. So a little bit on what are we talking about when we talk about some of the rules and regulations that we have today. This is sort of scoping this down to, this is the sandbox of mostly townships that we're talking about where we have the regulatory authority, not, for example, the city of Nisswa or the city of Pequot Lakes, things like that. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page for where we're doing things. Okay, so this is obviously a map of Crow Wing County with the townships and cities on it, a lot of different colors. We've broken up our township, or I'm sorry, our county into different zones. And I really thought this year we could put the face to the name. Some of you maybe have interacted with our staff who are out helping you achieve success with your goals. And so Bethany Soderlund is one of our environmental services specialists, and her zone is in the northern part of Crow Wing County. And Katie Kostoritz, her zone is in the middle, in the green area. Again, these are all environmental services specialists helping with permitting and things like that. And Nicolette Sivert is in the southwest side. And down in the southeast, Thomas, of course, is sitting next to me, has that sort of southeastern part of the county. We also have 2 other folks that work in our area. Nicole Erickson is AIS and water quality, doesn't necessarily have a zone, but it's countywide. And Dan McInich, who's our survey coordinator, reviews surveys, looks at splits, things like that. So that's really our team. And then, of course, that's me in the middle. I tried to avoid the whole Brady Bunch thing, but inevitably, I'm sure this looks a little Brady Bunch-like. But it's a really good team. Really proud to work with them, and I think they do an excellent job. We also have a couple of other folks that help us with our public hearing. Kiki Lindberry, Gina Roach, and of course, their supervisor, Stephanie Hansen. If you've had any variances or conditional use permits or things like that, you've probably interacted with these folks. While they're not technically the team that I'm working with managing, they're an important part from a public side of making sure that those things are going smoothly. Okay, a little bit on the year-end review. We've had over 10,000 customer contacts in 2020. That's about what we average consistently. We have a 98% positive response rate, and for the entire land services, and within an environmental services subcategory, we had 254 surveys of that with 98% positive feedback. So we're really happy about that. We're really happy about the feedback we're getting in that area. The average turnaround time for land use permit applications, consistently 3 to 4 days. The maximum that our standard is 8 days. That's once we get a complete application and everything's been vetted, we expect to get those turned around in short order, and we think we've done a good job trying to do that. And of course, we have a dedication to return emails and calls within 24 hours. So that's a little bit on the metrics of the customer service side from 2020. I wanted to talk a little bit about this year, a little bit more about the trend we had in 2020 that I didn't foresee. When COVID-19 hit, I really thought, personally, without any data, that we might have an issue. Maybe we were going to go into a recession and not have as many permits and things like that. And boy, was I wrong. We set a lot of records in 2020, and I expect the same in 2021. We were up 25% on our total permits issued, over 1,115. And then when you break it down by the type of permits, the land use and the septic up 25%. We had 45% more shoreline alteration permits, a little bit down in commercial, and then up on our sign permits. So for those of you that are real estate agents, I'm sure this is quite interesting for you. I'm sure you've seen this in your own interaction. When we break this down by the permit types, comparing 2019 to 2020, we have just exceeded our highest totals ever in almost every category, whether that's septic permits, E911, accessory structures, or new houses. We've just had a lot of volume coming at us. And it didn't matter if it was near shore in these riparian lots, or if it was close to the shore, or if it was away. Although I will say most of the heavy lifting here was near shore. Outside of 1,000 feet of lake, it was less so, but again, a lot of action. We also had a record amount of stormwater management plans that we approved, 104 in 2020, and that number has steadily grown year over year. That is an indication that there's more impervious surfaces on our lots as well. Whenever we get a lot more phone calls, a lot more permits, things like that, unfortunately, in 2020, we did see a massive increase in the number of violations that we received, 141, which is a substantial jump. It's a 74% increase. Overall, we're seeing that trend generally steadily increase. And so there's just a lot of activity, good and some bad, in the county that we're seeing. In terms of septic compliance inspections, I don't want to dwell too much on this. I think the number that a lot of folks want to focus on is when we look at what percent are passing. We had a huge number of compliance inspections. We are at 92% compliant. Generally, that's swung from 92 to 96. So it's still a high rate of compliance inspections passing in the county. Okay, and then in terms of total septic installs, this one I found particularly interesting because we're seeing a trend, generally speaking, in the last 5 years, where it used to be there was a lot of new systems compared to the number of upgrades. That indicates a lot of new housing starts or houses from scratch at times. What we're seeing now is more upgrades, which tells us there's not as many new housing construction, perhaps, but more rebuilds or upgrades that are necessary due to improvements. So you're seeing that trend of existing houses getting upgraded versus new houses. So I thought that was an interesting trend as well. So that's a little bit on how the year went in 2020 in terms of the numbers that we saw, our customer service interaction, and just really pleased that we continue to grow, we continue to get good feedback, and that we were able to meet customer needs so far. Okay, we're going to rapidly switch gears at this point. We're going to dive in now to stormwater management. This is a focus area for me this year. We have had stormwater management principles in this county for a long time. In 2011, when the land use ordinance was repackaged and redone, there was performance standards put in place and thresholds of impervious that required stormwater management plans. when that happened, we vastly increased the amount of stormwater management plans that we were reviewing and the scrutinization of when that happens. And so it's been a while since we've had a really robust session on this, but this session on stormwater management is going to really get in the weeds of sort of what we expect when we require a stormwater management plan, what we need to see for those minimum requirements. We're actually going to walk through what it sort of takes to build that stormwater management plan, including a little bit of the math behind it. It can be a little bit intimidating to go through something like this for those of you that typically hire this out or are working with others to do it. But I thought it was really important for not only contractors, but homeowners to understand that stormwater management plans do need to be detailed and include enough information for us to make good decisions on if this is going to be effective. Okay. So first, we're going to start out with a little bit of background on, why is stormwater a concept that we care about? And of course, we know that stormwater is water that's shedding off of surfaces with rain events or quote unquote storm events that can carry with it some nutrients and some elements that when introduced to an aquatic ecosystem can have the potential to nutrify it or eutrophic the lake and cause some food web imbalances and cause the water quality in the lake to change, oftentimes for the worse. So when we have decreasing water quality because of those issues, we are definitely going to see clarity go down, the fisheries and that food web decrease, and we're going to start seeing those property values be influenced by that, and ultimately potentially see decreased tourism. So this isn't just about the fish or the macrophytes or the other food web organisms. This is about the economy as well, and it's about social, which means how does it look? How can we recreate in waters that are declining water quality? So we care about it at a broad level because we all want the same thing. We all want good water quality. So that's a little bit about stormwater in general. What are we looking to fix? We want to capture that stormwater volume. We want to capture that sediment and the phosphorus. We want to mitigate it, which means we want to try and stop its effects. And we want to stop that habitat loss that can happen when we have water clarity problems. So that's really what we're trying to capture when we stop that stormwater from hitting our lakes and other areas. So we have an ordinance that's been designed to regulatory put standards in place to try and fix those issues. So we've tried to focus less on, well, why do I have to have a stormwater management plan? Because the ordinance says you have to, right? Or because the government says you have to, and more on why does the government say we have to? It's because all of our citizens who had input on that plan said, we want to help you stay on your property and stay on that lake for the reason that you moved here. We want to stop that pollution in the lake. And we think we can help, and we think you can help too. And so here's a plan in place that doesn't necessarily have to cost very much. It can help bring pollinator species out to your property. It can beautify your landscape. Oh, and by the way, you're doing the right thing, rather than because the ordinance says so. So we want to provide that guidance on what is a good stormwater management plan. The first thing I want to talk about is a stormwater management plan principally involves capturing the first 1.1 inch rain event. And I know we get some questions about why not like all the rain? Why not like a 5-inch rain event? There's a couple of reasons. The research has shown that between 60 and 80% of all the nutrient loading that's occurring on the landscape is flushed out in that first 1 inch rain event. And anything after that is you get the law of diminishing returns, which means the bigger you make your landscaping and holes dug to try to capture all the stormwater, you're not as effective at capturing anymore after you get that first drainage, 1 inch rain event. So we're trying to limit the landscaping and the dirt moving and the infrastructure and literally the cost to build stormwater management plans by focusing on that first inch rain event where all of the nutrient loading is occurring. And so it also is a nice bang for the buck where we can capture that cost per pound of phosphorus on that first rain event. So that's really a key feature is we're not trying to capture every single piece of water that's ever hit that property. We're trying to capture the first inch. So when we say stormwater management, we're really talking about 2 concepts. We're talking about permanent stormwater treatment, and we're talking about temporary erosion and sediment control. Both effectively mitigate the damages that happen with stormwater runoff, but they're 2 different design standards. One is temporary, during construction, before construction, when there's no stabilization. And the other one is going to be once we have things settled and stabilized, that we provide that long-term stable area where consistently on every rain event that occurs, we're getting that treatment. We're getting that groundwater recharge every time, and it's well designed and landscaped. So 2 different areas that we're going to talk about. So the first thing you are going to see on the right-hand side here is this is an example of a recent probably sand blanket or sand beach that was put in place on a lot with great intentions. Notice that the slope here is less than 10%. That's what we want. We want a nice level surface. It's right next to a dock. It's in a recreation use area, which we'll get into later. But it's in the right spot to achieve some positive things. The issue we have here is this was put in, and before stabilization, you can see some of the sand and the dirt is literally causing a plume in the water. It's not stabilized during and after construction. So the goal of these temporary erosion sediment control, which is required by the ordinance on all riparian properties during construction, is to stabilize those areas until some of that dirt is able to settle and be stabilized. So what we typically will do is we'll have a discussion with the property owner and the contractor during the site visit for the permit approval about need to have those in place and where some spots are that would be good to put those that are in between some wetlands or the right of way or the lake, right up against the project boundaries so that we are protecting that. And then we might perform some other periodic inspections to make sure that's in place. On this bottom picture, you can see that here's an example of not necessarily a sand blanket, but a landscaping operation where we've had effective, what we call a silt fence, which is one of our temporary BMPs, dug into the ground, entrenched, and withholding some of that sediment that's going to want to get down there. Now, of course, before that silt fence is removed, it's going to be good to try and push this up the hill and get this seeded so that you can remove the silt fence later. And what I mean by that is that's where we get into this final stabilization plan where you can remove your temporary best management practices and really feel good about not having weather events impact our product. Okay. So here's some other examples of some erosion control measures. Here's a double silt fence that was put in place just as a backup in case blew through the first one. Another example of a recent seeding event or hill stabilization plan right next to a wetland that probably connects to a public waterway. Pretty easy to install, very effective, not exactly the most attractive looking on the landscape, but the good news here is just temporary. Okay. I forgot how many click items I have on here. I just prefer to put them all up at once. So we do have performance standards in Crow Wing County. We have different zones on the landscape. So here we have a hypothetical lake. We have a zone called the shoreland protection zone, which is 500 feet from any lake, 150 feet from any river. That's our a really special zone where we're going to require that if you have over 15% impervious surface on your property, and for those of you that are wondering, an impervious surface is a roof, a sidewalk, a patio, or even a gravel driveway that has repeated compaction, that sheds water off the surfaces and moves it to a different area, along with the nutrients with it. So in the shoreline protection zone, if you have more than 15% impervious as part of a permit application, or over 10,000 square feet of impervious surface in general, we are going to have a stormwater management required. And if it's over 20% impervious, we're going to do an analysis, a shoreline rapid assessment model analysis of a buffer, no mow buffer zone, to ensure that you have additional protection mechanisms near the lake beyond just stormwater. In all of the shoreline district, which is 1,000 feet from a lake, and let's see, 300 feet from a river, we are going to calculate impervious surfaces for land use permit applications, just to make sure, even if you don't need a stormwater management plan in this shoreline buffer zone in the green area, just to make sure we're not going over 25%. Our maximum impervious allowed on any lot is 25%. And anything more than that would require what's called a variance, and we'll get into that later. But the reason we do that is to make sure we're meeting our Minnesota shoreline rules, first of all. And two, we want to protect the water quality of our lakes. There's been a lot of research shown that once we get less than 75% forest cover in the riparian zone of a lake or the watershed, we start to see statistically significant decline in the water quality of that lake. So it's no coincidence that that 25% is really a magical number for if all the properties started doing that, we're going to start to see rapid decline in our water quality. That's why we want to hit stormwater management principles before 25%. Okay, so when are stormwater management plans required? We already covered that for a shoreline permit in the shoreline protection zones for lots with 15 to 25%. We're going to require that. Most variance requests that we see when folks come to the Board of Adjustment, even if they're under 15%, most of the time there's going to be a condition placed on those to require stormwater management as well. Any shoreline permits in the shoreline district with more than 10,000 square foot of new impervious, regardless of the overall impervious of the lot, that's going to require a stormwater management plan. And we also require them for plats and conditional use permits as well. So those are specific high-level requests that we just unilaterally require them. Again, it's that 1-inch rain event on all impervious surfaces, both proposed and existing. There is also a requirement for the state of Minnesota that if you're disturbing over 1 acre of ground, that also requires a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or a SWIP, through a process through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So both the state and the county have a lot of concerns about stormwater management. All right, so we do focus highly on landscaping features using existing vegetated surfaces and natural depressions. Our goal is not to see property owners principally try and force them to re-landscape if there's already great features on the landscape that can hold it. We would rather see gutters or things installed to try and direct stormwater to those existing areas so we can limit the amount of dirt moving that's occurring on the site, limit the amount of landscaping that's occurring, and try and just use natural features that have been there for hundreds of or thousands of years so that we can achieve good results with minimal impact. We like to see those sandy soils, and the good news is the glaciers dropped the Crow sand plain on us, which covers most of west central and northern Crow Wing County, down from Crow Wing State Park all the way up through Mission Township and the Whitefish Chain, east towards Pelican Lake. That's all in the Crow Wing sand plain. We're so lucky to have those natural soils from that glacial outwash feature. So I think that's one of the lucky reasons in Crow Wing County we're so doing so well is we have those sandy soils. We do follow-ups on all of our stormwater management plans to ensure they're implemented. The goal of implementation, or mandatory goal, is they must be implemented within 2 years, which is the permit expiration, or whenever the project is completed. So if you finish a house in a year, rather than waiting up to 2 years, we want to see the stormwater in place right away. Common areas that we see stormwater practices include berms, rain gardens, and vegetated swales. This is an example of either probably a rain garden, just by the way it looks from the plantings. And that means it has soils and sandy substrate underneath that does a special job of filtering these out. This is an example of a berm concept of a stormwater feature. So you can see we've highlighted, you can't see it very well if I wouldn't have highlighted this, but just this little berm here, there might have been a little water-oriented accessory structure, a little shed here. It's all it really takes is this little berm here to enough done that one train event to just trap the water, keep it right in front of it, and prevent it from getting into the lake. Here's another example of an excellent use of a berm. And I think it's another reminder for those of you that are doing stormwater management plans, they can be subtle. Stormwater management plan doesn't mean the MnDOT retention basins where you could swim basically in the pool or stock it with fish. Those are fairly high profile, very large industrial areas. The properties we're dealing with principally are small lots under an acre on a lake where we can be effective using small practices. This is an example of a no-mow sort of vegetative area where when the water sheds off, it can just settle in this area, shedding already in this natural area. So long as it isn't a wetland, that's going to do another effective job on the landscape. Here is an example of just a little trench rock area. We see these under drip lines, under eaves of houses where we're getting possibly runoff from the house over here, and it just is allowed to settle into these rocks and perform two things. One, it's preventing it from getting into the lake, it acts as a barrier, and two, it's got groundwater recharge. So stormwater groundwater recharge is the natural either bacterial action or using the natural elements of the soil with particles and ions to decharge the nutrients and strip the water of those nutrients through natural ground recharging. So there's a couple of reasons why that's good. Here's an example of a natural swale that was specifically built. This probably wasn't naturally occurring. This is probably an area that was, I'm just checking my clock here, make sure I'm on task. This is just a natural area that is allowing water to filtrate into and get that groundwater recharge. And as you can see, look at both of these examples. Great plants for pollinator species, attractive. Yes, in its new phase, this can look a little unsightly, but give this thing about a year, and we're going to get some nice shrubs, some good infiltration, and enhance the landscape. Here is another great example of using those features to really build up the landscape. No, you won't be able to play volleyball in here without breaking an ankle, right? But we hope that there's plenty of other areas where you can both recreate and enjoy stormwater features. Okay, we talked a little bit about the need, I'm just gonna burn through this pretty quick, for if you're over 20%, that we're gonna require a no-mow buffer near the shoreline. And so we've developed a way to objectively figure out the width of those no-mow buffers. And so a no-mow buffer is an area of, it doesn't mean no maintenance, it just means it can't be intensively mowed on a weekly or bi-weekly basis like Kentucky bluegrass. It's It's got to be at least 6 inches tall, and it must perform the functions to which it is designed. So deep-rooting plants, typically native plants that are allowed to mitigate stormwater, protect erosion from our shorelines, especially from wave action, prevent ice heaving issues, and trap that sediment. So we've developed a scoring system that we got from the University of Minnesota and the state of Minnesota and other research models to try and figure out if it's going to be 10, 15, or 20 feet based on scores of the buffer. The width of the buffer needs to be at least 70% of the width of the shoreline. Why 70%? We want to make sure folks do have an area where they can put a dock in and a small recreation area, as you can see here, for folks to do enjoy the water on 30% of the width of the lot. So we allow for that, but then we really want to make sure that if you need that buffer, that the other 70% is adequately buffered. Okay, so this simple scoring system, basically, without going through it too intensively, amounts to: is there erosion occurring? Is it stable or unstable? Do we have natural vegetation on the ground and in the canopy, both the ground and the canopy? And to what extent is the property dense? Meaning, do we have dense shading or do we have sparse vegetation? And we add those scores up, and generally speaking, the more unstable, the less dense the tree cover and the shrub cover and ground cover, the more we're going to want to increase that buffer width. The more dense, it goes in reverse. We don't need too much of a buffer because those trees and those shrubs and those plants are acting as a barrier to prevent water from getting speed. So this is an example of an area that some folks might say, well, there's a buffer. Look, it's grass. So a buffer is anything that isn't concrete, and that's not how we look at it. A buffer is natural areas. This is being mowed consistently. The only area that probably isn't is right near the shoreline here. You've got to see a good example of the property up to the west here, the other side, of what a natural buffer would look like. So this area is an area where if we had over 20% impervious, we would need to put in that buffer of 10, 15, or 20 feet. So that's an example of that. It just because it's green doesn't mean it's buffer. Okay, so we talked a little bit about when is the stormwater management going to be required at the time of permitting or with a public hearing, if it meets thresholds for percent impervious. Once we know, okay, we have to have a stormwater management plan, and we talked about the different types of features that could include stormwater management. And by the way, some of the other ones we haven't talked about are rain barrels. So those are 50 to 90 gallon barrels that literally capture the water, and then you can use that to water your gardens and things like that. Those are also great features. But once we've gone through those practices that are permanent that you can choose from to retain the water, then we need to get into looking at our stormwater management packet. We provide this to all property owners and all applicants who come to our customer service counter or apply online so that they can understand what I just talked about, as well as how do you build a stormwater management plan? How does that, where the rubber meets the road, actually draw the plan so I feel like I'm successful and I can succeed? And so the basis for that is this packet, and here's the front cover of it. It's been rehabilitated about a year ago, so I think it's even better than what it was before. And the other foundational document we have for building a good stormwater management plan is our impervious calculation worksheet. Because remember, all stormwater stems from impervious shedding of water. And so we always, on all of our permits in the Shoreland District, keep track of all of the length and the width and the total square footage and where's the property at, and you simply divide the square footage of your existing and proposed structures by the lot area, and you get a number, and that's your percent impervious coverage. And I know that's really difficult to read because some of you probably have smaller screens, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with this concept. What we're going to do today and it can be a little intimidating for those of you that haven't dealt with it before, is we're going to talk about the bottom of this impervious worksheet as well. Because the bottom of this worksheet is really designed at helping folks understand how stormwater calculations play into your impervious calculations. Because with stormwater, it's all about volume retained. Can we retain the volume on the landscape? Okay. So we're going to go through in just a little bit here an example of building a stormwater management plan. We are recording this presentation, and so if at any time you feel, man, this was just way over my head, this was too much right now, that's okay. I think when we post this presentation, we'll have a little cheat sheet on at the, for example, the 30-minute mark. Here's where you can find the stormwater start, or here's where you can find this or that. So you can just go to those different chapters and start out where you need to do. So don't worry about it if it's a lot here. We're here to help. Okay, so whenever you're applying for a land use permit, you're going to be required to fill out this impervious worksheet. And so here we have an example of these existing structures where we have different sheds or items on the landscape that are already existing, and we're capturing their square footage. That includes the driveways as well. So here's a driveway that's about 5,233 square feet, and some other patios and sidewalks. And those are added up, and they're cumulatively totaled. Then we get towards the bottom, and we've got our proposed structures. So maybe someone wanted a 30 by 11 shed, or a 19 by 10 addition to their house, or they want to build a new driveway or a new parking area. In this case, it doesn't look like they want to do that, but that's another option as well. It adds up all the existing and the proposed impervious, adds them all up together. The sheet sort of auto adds those up. It looks at your existing impervious and then your percent impervious with the new additions. And if you've been paying attention to what we've been talking about with our performance standards, once we add the total impervious divided by the lot area that we can find on our GIS map, that's how we get our proposed impervious. And as you can see, it's over 15%. So in this case, when we see that number, or when our environmental service specialist who's looking at this application see that number, that's going to trigger us to say, hey, we're going to help out here with building a stormwater management plan, helping you succeed. But ultimately, it is the property owner's responsibility to build that plan. We can offer a little bit of assistance, but it'll be your plan that you get to build. Okay, so let's talk about the minimum requirements that are going to be required for every stormwater management plan in Crow Wing County under our jurisdiction. The first thing that's going to be required is a north arrow along with the property boundary and information. Second, and we're going to go through an example of each one of these steps and how that's actually going to look on paper. Second is we want to see both the existing and the proposed impervious areas on paper, on your plan. Here's the good news. All land use permits require a site plan, so you can use your site plan that you've already developed for the permit that you're applying for and just add to it. So you're just going to take those existing and proposed impervious areas, the driveways, and you're going to put them on paper and to scale as much as possible. Then you're going to add some drainage arrows to show the flow of water. You're going to show where those wells and the drain fields are, and you're going to show where those retentions areas are. And I'm going to walk you through each one of these. And then you're going to go through the math, which, by the way, is the hardest step, the most intimidating step for most property owners. And that's okay. We're going to try and walk you through a very simple example so you feel empowered to do better. And then at the end, if there's any gutters or anything you're going to add, we want you to highlight that so it's clear that that's going to be developed. So there you go. There's 7, I'll call it simple steps. Some of you might be laughing, but I think once we go through this, I think we can do this together. There's a couple of do nots, not a couple, but there's a few do nots that we absolutely don't want to have on our stormwater management plans if we can all help it. One, it's against the law, and it's just not a good idea to direct stormwater into a wetland. That's because wetlands are protected by the Wetland Conservation Act. They're extremely important for salamanders and other amphibians that rely on them, not only for reproduction, but for habitat. They also perform a vital stormwater protection and are there to help with nutrient loading as well. So we don't want to direct stormwater into a wetland. It'll mess that ecosystem up and have silt loading. The other thing we don't want to do is we never want to direct stormwater into somebody else's road right of way. As fun as that might seem, right? Hey, I've got a ditch in the road right of way, I'll just put it there. Those ditches and those public road right of ways were only designed to handle the stormwater that road was designed for. And if you load that up, it might wreck the public roads infrastructure or cause additional loading into our lakes and rivers that it wasn't designed for. You also do not want to direct stormwater into an adjoining property owner that could be sold as a separate lot, or, excuse me, onto an adjoining property that you own. Excuse me, I'm going to start over on this one. If you've got two lots back to back, you don't want to dump it on the other lot that you have if it could be sold separately, because as soon as you sell it and you're dumping stormwater onto it, that's not going to be a solution. That new property owner will block it, and now we don't have a good plan. The other thing you can't do is you can't dump it on your neighbor's property unless you have an easement recorded. You need to keep it on your property as much as possible. We also, by definition, definitely don't want to run stormwater into our lakes, rivers, or streams, because after all, that is the point. We want to prevent nutrient loading. And we don't, if possible, we're going to try not to dump stormwater into our drain fields, our septic drain fields, just because those are areas where there's bacterial action and there's a lot of microbial and bacterial processes that are occurring that were not designed for extra influences of water. So a few do nots to really keep in mind. Okay, we're going to take a look at an example now of a property and build them a simple stormwater management plan. We're not going to go through every one of their features on their properties, but just focus on a couple areas. And what I feel so bad about this one is, if we were in person, I was going to break everyone up into groups. We'd split up into teams of 4, and we'd make our own stormwater management plans. Unfortunately, we're getting close to the end of this COVID issue, but for now, I'm just going to have to walk through the example sort of immediately. So here we've figured out how to get on our GIS Interactive map. And as you can see, we've been able to zoom in. And by the way, later on, I'll show you how you can get to the GIS Interactive map and how you can zoom in, et cetera, so you'll know how to do that too. And we've highlighted a particular parcel on a specific lake, as you can see, with an existing house and a driveway. And they have a proposal. So first off, we have the home, which I've highlighted here. They have, this is an existing home with an existing driveway. The first thing you might be saying is, what do you need an existing driveway? In this case, it's a gravel driveway. They're going to improve that to a bituminous driveway, but it is a driveway still, even though there's trees on the property. They also have a shed that you can't see, but it's located in the northeast corner. And those are the existing impervious that are on the property. What they would like to do is they would like to add an addition to the west side, as you can see in this dotted line, and a patio in the front. And of course, this meets the lake setbacks of 75 feet, and we're assuming everything else in terms of a regulatory check, 10 feet from the property line setback, the road right-of-way setback, and everything else checks out, which our staff is happy to check. So they've applied for a new patio and a new addition. Excuse me, the patio probably doesn't need a permit, but the new addition does, but we're aware that they want a patio. And so those are increases in impervious surface. So we've run our impervious calculation math. And remember, we came up with 17.7% in the example I showed you previously. So hypothetically on this one, let's pretend that they triggered over the top with that addition and that patio. They went over 15%, and now we're requiring a stormwater management plan. So now, step 1. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have this blank canvas. We're going to build our site plan. So we're going to have the lake and the road and our north arrow. Very simple, very easy to do. North is usually up, right? And then we're going to put our name and the property ID on it so we know exactly where we're at. Again, because you've already had a site plan with the permit, this first step should already be taken care of. The second thing we're going to do is we are going to draw our existing structure, our house and our driveway and the shed. And those are existing and the size. And then we're going to add our patio and our proposed structure, which is to the west and to the north. Very easy, simple addition. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw some drainage arrows. Now, this can be a little intimidating if you've never done this before because you're not really sure where to draw these arrows. These drainage arrows show the shedding of the water as it hits the roof. The roof is pitched in the middle, so the water sheds to the south and sheds to the north, depending on the pitch of the roof. The proposed addition has a different pitched roof, which sheds water to the right. I'm sorry, to the west. And this shed also sheds some water. The driveway sheds this way. How do we know the driveway sheds to the south? We look at our contour lines. We look at our contour lines from this map. You can throw on 2-foot contours and you can see where the water generally tends to want to go. If you're not as familiar with contour lines, you can simply know the layout of your property just through the experience of your everyday life there. You know where the hills and valleys are on your property. So we want to know where's the water shedding right now. And so you're going to put those arrows on the property where you think it's shedding right now. Okay. I forgot one. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to show the location of our septic tank and the drain field. In this case, it's a mound drain field and our well, because generally, if we can avoid it, if possible, it's not required, we want to try and avoid our septic systems if we can. In this case, it looks like the water's shedding just to the south of that, so that could be a good thing. Just kind of an FYI for now. The next thing we're going to do, without doing any math yet, so we're going to stay away from the math for now, is we're going to look at our options from our stormwater packet and decide what are the features that I want to add to my landscape to try and capture and retain this water so it can get groundwater recharged. And so in this case, this is where it requires you to really look at your property and ask yourself, do I have any existing features that just are going to work well, again, on my property, not my neighbors, that I could utilize to try and take advantage of it? And in this case, let's pretend that it's just a flat lawn over here and there's really no basin for basin 1, and this is going to be needed to be constructed a bit. But let's also pretend that basin 2 and 3 are existing, and those are existing natural features in the landscape they want to take advantage of. And they also want to build some rain gardens. It looks like this property owner realizes that because it's such a severe slope down to the lake, they want to add a shoreland buffer to try and stop that shedding of the water and the nutrient loading as well, and they can still have their beach. So they've added these features on the landscape. How do you know how many basins to add or how many retention areas to add? Just start out broadly guessing at areas where that water needs to be stopped or spread out before it gets to certain critical areas, and start there. Next thing we're going to do is we actually need to run the math to make sure that our proposed basins or retention areas are big enough, deep enough, and just area enough to handle a 1-inch rain event. Okay, so this is where the math comes in. We know we have a driveway of 3,332 square feet, and we know we have a proposed retention area that we want to have. How do we know how big to make the retention area? So here's how we're going to do that for a 1-inch rain event. And we're only going to talk about the driveway right now. So forget about the house, forget about anything else. Let's just focus on the driveway. The first thing we're going to do is figure out what is our impervious square footage for the driveway. Here it is, 3,332. Remember this bottom line here at the bottom of my screen? This is coming right from that impervious worksheet that I showed you earlier. So now you're seeing how the bottom of that impervious worksheet is really being used. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply this impervious surface, the driveway, by 0.083. Now I'm not going to get into where 0.083 came from, but just know that's a conversion number that we get to cubic feet. It's it's a constant number to convert square footage area to cubic foot for a 1-inch rain event. And so when we do that, we take this number, multiply it by 0.083, and we get 276 cubic feet. That's the required storage area that we need to have somewhere in Basin 1 to make sure that when the water sheds off the driveway, it's going to be captured in a 1-inch rain event. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick the size of Basin 1. So how do we know the size that Basin 1 needs to be? Well, you get to pick. Typically, we see between 6 and 15 inches depth for a basin. So the size of the basin depends how deep you're going to make it. In this case, the property owner says, I want to make mine 6 inches deep. So in order to do that, we're going to run the math. 270, I'm sorry. In order to get a 6-inch deep basin, we need to multiply our cubic feet, 276, times 2. You see it says right underneath the 6-inch thing? It says times 2. When we do that, we get 553. So what that means is you need a 553 square foot basin, 6 inches deep, to handle a 1-inch rain event for the driveway. How do we know how big that is in reality? Take the square root, if you have a handy calculator, of 553, and that'll give you a perfect square. If it was a square, it's about 23 by 23. And there you go. You just did it. You just built your first stormwater retention feature just for the driveway alone. Now, I'm not gonna, in this case, run through all of the other calculations needed, but remember, only the driveway and a little bit of the roof is shedding off towards Basin 1. You need to run the math yourself on how much retention is needed for those other impervious surface areas. So for example, the house and the shed, you'll have to run the math on that, and you'll have to run the math on these other areas to make sure that all impervious surfaces have a place for the water to go. Once you've done all of this math, you've treated the entire property, and you've done it. In this case, after we ran the math, we needed 617 cubic feet. We got 646. You treated for a 1-inch rain event. Congratulations, you built your first stormwater management plan. And I just wanted to show this because you can do it, and we're here to help you if we just break these plans down. So I know that was a lot for some of you, and if you want to go back and review this again later, or share this with others, we're happy to do that. The last thing we need to do is make sure that if we say the water is being shedded off to the front of the property and you need gutters to help do it, we need you to highlight on your plan where these gutters are going to be to help force the water go where it's going to go. So simply highlight it so that we know, yep, you're going to install some gutters. That's really going to help us out. Okay, here's some examples of some site plans that have already been developed. They don't all have to look like our perfectly hand-drawn plans that we spent a lot of time developing. You can also refer to these other ones. Here's one where they just have numbers referring to them, and then they have a table that shows what they're going to do. But note, it has all the things we need. Where they're going to be, the square footage of it, how deep they're going to be, and the size. Here's another one that looks a lot different, but it still achieves the same result. I know it's difficult to read, but we have the arrows showing the water shedding off different properties, lines. We have, and then we have the infiltration area needed to achieve stormwater management. Here is yet another one showing, again, where the water is going to shed off, where those basins are, those retention areas, and then all of the area calculations showing that it's going to meet the 1-inch rain event, including this one having a 15-foot native buffer at the bottom. So they don't all have to look the same, but they should achieve our minimum requirements. One moment. Okay. Okay, there are a number of challenges that we tend to get on different properties. I'm not going to go through all of these because I want to make sure we're staying on track for time. So I might buzz through a couple of these challenging situations just to make sure that we're all on the same page for how we handle these. Sometimes we have a situation where we have a very steep hill or bluff, and then on the backside it's just a road right of way. Where are we possibly going to build our stormwater solutions? In those really tough lots where it's just steep slopes and bluffs everywhere, that's when we're going to look at no mold buffers, native plantings, rain barrels, or downspouts. We just do the best we can. We're certainly not going to make people mow down their bluff or their steep slope just to put in a basin. That's probably doing more harm than good. So in those areas, the focus is on retention of native plants, retention of vegetation, and working with them to achieve it. Okay, so a lot of times we do get property owners that simply want to push their stormwater close to the lake because there's a natural bowl there. And so when is it appropriate to push stormwater to the lake as a first solution? And so one of the things is we have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. Do they have a no mold buffer area? Do they have a historic ice ridge that can help? Do they have enough 3 feet of soil separation or enough soil separation where we're going to get some groundwater treatment? Or is it a floodplain? Is it really close to a wetland where all they're doing is pushing water into more wet areas? So our first solution is to put it in areas where we think we're going to get that groundwater recharge. And then our second option is to do what's being proposed here. We do get questions about, can we put in these French drains or other things that take gutter and stormwater and literally direct it underground through piping? Our answer to that is, it's not illegal. It's more not preferred if you don't have at least, I would say, 2 to 3 feet of separation and the right soils underneath it, so it's not injecting it directly into groundwater. If you've got enough separation between the groundwater, this isn't a problem, but we just need to make sure that it's on the right spot to prevent those issues from occurring. Generally speaking, it's not recommended on properties that have groundwater or surface water very close to the surface. Can a shoreland buffer act as a stormwater management plan? The answer is yes, it can, as long as it's properly treated, but it's not going to be effective if it's on a steep slope. So we do see stormwater management plans where they just push the water into a buffer and call it good. That's not going to fly if it's at a very steep slope, at a steep angle. We are seeing a lot more plans with wood chips as well. And again, those wood chipped areas, we want to see double shredded hardwood mulch as best as possible rather than those flat colored chips that just don't work as well. So that's sort of an open-ended question on that one. Can you use pervious paving systems, including patios? The answer is you can. If you've got more than 3 feet of groundwater separation, that is designed to actually have that infiltration, and that it's basically engineered as such to handle that. Pervious paving systems are essentially a stormwater treatment in and of itself, so you can push stormwater to that as long as it's designed on the top and below to treat those stormwater areas. So with that, there are a couple of additional issues to chat about. I did run out of time on this one, but I will just add that we also have permeable surface systems that look like a driveway, right? But they're actually designed and engineered to achieve stormwater best management practices. It includes the soil underneath, specific types of rock, specific pore sizes, and a base bedding and things like that. So there's a lot happening under the ground that you don't see. They're typically more expensive, but if built, designed, and maintained correctly, they can achieve good results. We do allow up to 100% stormwater credit for these if designed properly, and they can look very nicely if installed correctly. So here's a couple of examples of that. Okay, we're gonna get started again. Just a quick break and dive right into some wonderful world of floodplain regulations. So those of you that are still getting back in your chairs or getting back into it, I'll just get started. Like I said, this is recorded, so at any time you want to go back and take a look at it, you're certainly more than welcome to. Okay, so a little bit of history, floodplain rules and regulations at the federal level really started back in 1968, where they developed those standards. They're administered locally, but they come from the federal and the state level. And then, of course, the county incorporates floodplain rules by reference. They can be more restrictive than the state and federal rules, but no less restrictive. Flood insurance became mandatory in 1973. And some might be thinking, man, 1968, 1973, I don't remember having that issue. The issue back 40, 50 years ago with these was the availability of precise modeling and mapping to fully understand where the floodplains are, and the lack of understanding of where OHW is, ordinary high water. So theoretically, while we might have had these flood insurance programs and these floodplains theoretically mapped, the number of lakes and public water bodies where this was effectively administered and mapped was limited. So specifically in Crow Wing County, what you're going to see is we really didn't see a lot of this happening until 2017. By the time we had serious modeling from the state down to do all these lakes, it had been a while. So the DNR is the National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator. In fact, they have a person who's dedicated entirely to the state floodplain manager, and her name is Cecile Strauss. And she works for the DNR, and she's been a great resource for Crow Wing County for questions that we have and statewide trying to coordinate all these floodplain issues. The minimum state standard is a 1% chance of flood. It used to be called a 100-year rain event, but that terminology has shifted to a 1% chance of a 100-year rain event would happen, and what would the model look like if that 100-year or 1% chance flood would look like? What damage would occur? What changes to the landscape and things like that? What would that look like, and how would that adversely affect humans who are intersecting more than ever in areas where some building areas can be a little bit sketchy? So the state provides that technical advice, oversight, calibration to how we're supposed to be approaching our ordinance and interpret it, and does review and approve ordinances, and does provide assistance during a disaster situation, which hopefully doesn't happen. Along with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So again, we started LIDAR, which is our very precise 2-foot contour mapping, in 2007. We had our first LIDAR airplane kind of driven map of the ground, and it was fairly expensive. We got that interactive map. We got the data from that. Once we had that, the state of Minnesota incorporated that into some new modeling to be able to better predict where our floodplain areas are in Crow Wing County. So Beginning in 2017, most of the major lakes in Crow Wing County had a floodplain map for the first time beyond the paper maps that were pretty old. And we were able to digitally zoom in and out and really get an understanding of where our floodplain areas are. Okay, so we in Crow Wing County have the zoning authority for the townships, except for Crow Wing and Irondale, for our floodplain areas. We've got a floodplain ordinance, that's Article 21, and we keep good records, and we want to make sure that when development on these properties is occurring, that we have appropriate oversight, regulatory authority to make sure folks are not building in areas they shouldn't. Again, state has oversight of it to make sure we're doing the right thing. They coordinate with the federal government as well. And if there is a watershed district, we don't have one, we don't have the 30 Lakes Watershed District, but they may have some regulations as well, including perhaps the Mississippi Headwater Board. Okay, a couple of things before we get into the meat of this. First thing is to understand what is an ordinary high water level, or OHW. It's the boundary of public waters and wetlands, and it's a bit technical here. It's the point where the natural vegetation changes from aquatic to terrestrial, or from from the arrowhead or the cattail transition zone to more of that alder shrub scrub into an upland area, and the wetland area is that transitional zone. So when that changes, and there's statistics to that, that's our OHW. So OHW again is where we get from the bed of the water, where we see that transition zone to reeds and the grasses up to sedges and things like that. The 1% chance of flood is always higher than OHW, right? Because OHW is the ordinary high water, whereas the flood is going to be something that is extraordinary. So then the next term we have is what's called the base flood elevation. This is the 1% change equal or exceeding in any, the 1% chance being equal or exceeded in any given year. Some people call it a 100-year flood event, base flood elevation, a high-risk flood area, etc. But that's the point at which water would, on an elevation basis, rise and create risky situations. And then we have two other definitions. One is called the floodway. The floodway for a river is basically the channel and the area in the spring where that water is going to be fluxing in and out on a seasonal basis. So not a 100-year flood event, but every spring it widens out, it gets bigger, and then it goes back down into the channel. So a floodway is in between the ordinary high water mark and that floodplain forest surrounding it. The flood fringe zone, that's the area where on a 100-year flood event, the water would go even further. So floodway, you have your normal summer stream, so like the Mississippi River kind of hangs out in this normal, it's high current. In the spring, it might overflow into these silver maple basswood forests right here. That's not a 100-year rate event, that's just seasonal. When we get into the flood fringe, that's when you get into your high-risk flood events where if structures are being built in the flood fringe area, where you get risky things happening. So here again, you have your normal channel in the summertime, and then in the spring, it might flow over its banks and create a floodway area, seasonal flooding. When we get into the flood fringe zone, that's where you get into beyond seasonal disturbances. You get into your 100-year flood event issues. Okay. Then we have another alphabet soup definition, and again, this is diving pretty deep into it, but we have something called the regulatory flood protection elevation, or what I'm going to say moving forward, just so I don't have to say regulatory flood protection elevation over and over, RFP, That's an elevation that is 1.5 feet for the purposes of Crow County higher than the base flood elevation. So it's 1.5 feet higher than the 100-year flood event. And so that's going to be really important, this RFP, because we're starting to get into the rules of what you can or cannot do in a flood fringe district. Is you need to elevate your structures to the RFPE, so above the base flood elevation. So the base flood elevation, like I said, is right here. That's the area where on a 100-year flood event that the water would creep up to. When we talk about the minimums of where structures need to be, they need to be at or above the RFP, which is that 1.5 feet. I know this says a foot, but in Crow County, it's 1.5 feet extra protection above that, so that we're getting those out of those flood event areas. So that's what that is. It's that stage increase due to the flood, a minimum foot of freeboard, and then you get to your regulatory floodplain elevation. So what are the rules generally speaking? If you're building inside a flood fringe area, you need to elevate the lowest floor of your structure to the bottom of it needs to be at the RFPE, again, 1.5 feet above base flood elevation, and you need to have a 15-foot fill pad extending out from your structure and laterally, and then ending no lower than base flood elevation. So you're essentially perching your house up adequately to avoid the 1% chance of a flood event. So what kinds of structures need to do this? Any new structures, any total replacement of structures, and again, we're talking about structures in the flood fringe zone. New structures, total replacement, anytime you're maintaining or rehabilitating structures that result in more than 50% of the replacement cost value. So there's a certain point there where you're not just maintaining, you're essentially almost replacing your house just due to the maintenance. Any additions to existing structures that lie in the flood fringe area or below the RFP in the shoreline district. So basically what doesn't apply, doing nothing, having a house already in the flood fringe district and just simply maintaining it and, you know, adding shingles or maybe siding, that not a problem. So what are your options? You need to put it on fill, or you can flood proof it if it's less than 576 square feet and it's not used for a dwelling unit. So what are we going to do to figure out if our property is in a floodplain or in the flood fringe zone? Go to the interactive map that Crow County has and determine if the property is impacted by a floodplain. We have a specific layer that you can turn on, and it's a kind of a greenish bluish color. And if your structure that you're proposing or adding onto is in that area, that's a concern. You'll want to rough stake the building. You'll then want to hire a surveyor to make sure that base flood elevation line is set, and then shoot some topography. You want to make sure that you establish a foundation so that the lowest floor is at or above the RFPE. Then you need a 15-foot wide fill pad around the building. And then after it's been built, a surveyor needs to verify that those elevations through an elevation certificate have been met and then submit that to the county. So that seems like a lot to remember. It is. Your surveyor can help you through this process, and so can the county. We're just trying to give you a little bit of a primer here. All right, so let's just go to a specific example of an actual, theoretical example on a lake. Here we have a mud lake, which is a natural environment lake. And I believe this is, I think near Ideal Township. I could be wrong. But in this case, there's a proposed structure in this red square. It's going to meet all of the lake setbacks and all the other setbacks, right? We assume that any structure is going to meet all of our other setbacks. They want to put it right here on this knob. Excuse me. But as you can see, once we turned on our floodplain layer, and in this case I made it a little bit translucent so you can see through it, the new proposed shed or building is intersecting over the top of the floodplain layer. When that happens, we need to meet those minimum requirements. If in this example, the structure that's being built is less than 576 square feet and not used as a dwelling unit, you can flood proof it and then have it certified by an architect that it is flood proof, or you can elevate it on a, up to the RFP and then put the fill pad surrounding it. However, if it's more than 576 square feet or any structure that's used as a dwelling unit, no matter the size, you have to elevate it on fill with a 15-foot fill pad. Or you can seek a conditional use permit through a public hearing process to use alternative elevation methods, so example, pilings, blocks. Or you can flood proof it through a CUP as well. Or you can seek a variance to not meet the minimum elevation requirements with no alternative. Again, the latter two can be challenging to get if there's reasonable alternatives to get this 50-foot fill pad. So those are your options. Now, let's just say in this other example, the person wants to build a structure outside of the floodplain, but is still meeting setbacks, but wants to put it in this area. This is still not as safe as you might think, because if they add a basement or if they dig into the landscape, and anytime they're attempting to go below the RFPE elevation, they still have to meet those minimum levels. The only good news about this area is they're not required to have a fill pad surrounding it. They can use any alternative methods for elevating it, or they can simply flood proof it, and all of those are fair game because they're technically not in the FEMA mapped floodplain. But if they're adding a basement, the basement still can't go into the earth, into the RFP. They still have to make sure the lowest level is still, even if they're outside of this blue mapped area. This is an example of what a flood proofing looks like for a small shed. Notice that they have small openings on the bottom, and it's anchored, and these openings automatically occur so that when the flood event comes, a human doesn't have to come in and make sure it's all good. It just flows in and out. And the utilities are elevated. That's an example of flood proofing so that they don't need to elevate it. Again, you can't do this for things that are more than 576 or more than 575 square feet or a dwelling. When you come to Crow Wing County and you apply for a land use permit and we determine that it's in the floodplain, we're going to get you started by giving you what's called a FEMA data sheet. And what this is you saying by your signature at the bottom that I agree that it's in a floodplain and that I understand that it has to meet minimum height requirements. And so we're going to have you fill all of this out. We give you the required elevations. All you have to do is put in what you're proposing to do for your elevations and then sign the front. Then you have to, when you're finished with your structure, you have to come back in and hire a surveyor to make sure that they shoot the elevations that are actually as built and then turn that into our office. And the surveyor has to sign it with their signature and turn it in. The way we check for these things is when we do riparian follow-up visits on all of our permits on Lakeshore, we will be looking for this sheet to come into our office. The way we know that it's met it is typically we'll get an elevation certificate from the surveyor that affirms that the minimum elevations have been met. All right, well, welcome back to those of you that are still there. We're going to keep going here. Now the items that we have get a little bit more crunched. And so that might be good in terms of changing the pace a little bit. That stormwater one, I know This is a pretty deep dive of an hour of intense stormwater stuff, but we're gonna do some shoreline rules, basic things. These are more items that we probably do typically every year, but always good to reaffirm. Okay. So these are just random subjects that we have in our shoreline rules and our ordinance that we thought we'd highlight for clarity. So when we have areas in the shoreline district that are at least 25 feet tall vertically, not the slope, but the vertical height is 25 feet, and the slope is 30%. Then, and it's facing public water, drains towards public water, and is in the shoreline district. Then we're going to call those things bluffs, and those are right from the Minnesota shoreline rules. And bluffs have pretty strict requirements due to their susceptibility to for failure. Obviously, we're getting a lot of runoff that can run down a bluff and impact our waters. And also for a visual consideration, bluffs have a visual quality to them in the Minnesota rules that's also being considered as well. So when we meet that criteria, we have what's called a bluff impact zone. And a bluff impact zone is 30 feet from the top of the bluff, where that criteria meets, and from the toe at the bottom. Obviously, what we want to avoid with bluffs, and I don't see a lot of this severe example, but is the kind of scenario you see here where you literally have a catastrophic failure of a slope and very difficult to remediate those issues once we have that caving. What do we allow within a bluff in our ordinance? We allow very limited vegetation clearing, up to 8 feet wide, just for a path to get down the bluff. And actually, the clearing can be 8 feet, but any path inside of it can only be 4 feet for a walkway. So it's an 8-foot clearing, up to 4 feet, stairway and lift. We allow landings to zigzag down that can be up to 32 square feet to sort of traverse down the switchbacks down these bluffs. And of course, we allow for the removal of dead, down, and hazardous vegetation. So pretty restrictive in terms of what we allow. This is not a Crow Wing County picture. For those of you that are wondering, this is probably somewhere on the Pacific Northwest, quite frankly. But so it's not a Duluth picture, but it is an example of massive failure on bluff. And I'm sure we'll never see that, but it's always interesting to show these photos of dramatic things. So what's not allowed? Any structures within a BIZ, any dirt moving at all, except for the placement of stairs, any private roads, driveways, or parking areas. So it's a very limited consideration. I will say we've seen a lot of the easy lots developed, and now we're getting to these marginal lots on these lake shores that are now being picked up by purchasers, and it's important to understand what we're getting into when we purchase those lots or want to further develop them, because they've been left for a reason. This is the goal for bluffs, right? This is what we want. We've got our 4-foot walkway and traversing up. We've got great visual screening, very well stabilized, good habitat, and just all around a great situation. This is nice. That little bit of riprap at the edge here is probably helping with bank erosion as well. The other thing that I think gets forgotten too much, and we're placing a new emphasis on, especially staff training, as well as customer services, this concept of steep slope. So often we get addicted to, if it's not a bluff, just have at it. But the shoreland rules are pretty clear on steep slopes. Steep slopes are what we'd say is almost a bluff, but not really, not quite meeting the criteria. There's a lot more flexibility allowed with them, but still some management. Steep slopes have more than 12% slope over at least 50 feet. On those areas, and it's in the shoreline district. For those areas, we have the ability to evaluate possible erosion impacts before issuing a permit, and we can require erosion control and a stormwater management plan on steep slopes if we think that it's necessary. However, if a steep slope is more than 30%, even if it's not a bluff, we don't allow vegetation removal, and dirt moving is only allowed with a stormwater management plan and erosion control. So not all steep slopes are created equal, but even if you don't quite meet the bluff criteria, there's still some pretty strict regulations. There is no steep slope impact zone though. What we mean by that is there's no 30 feet from the top or toe of a steep slope. And you can still do, dirt moving and things like that. It's just that it is still intensely regulated. Okay, moving on to ice ridges. Historic ice ridges and annual ice ridges. So annual ice ridges are those that are formed within a calendar year and typically doesn't have well-established herbaceous and or woody vegetation. Historic ice ridges, though, are more than 2 years, and I think it's different if somebody has been maintaining it for 30 years and they forgot to do it last year and this year they do it. We understand that, but you're gonna see shrubs, trees, typically you're gonna see cobbles or boulders from the glacial till that's formed, and you're gonna see established woody vegetation. We wanna see ice ridges remain because they prevent shoreline erosion big time from wave action. They also provide critical habitat from the shadiness of those trees overhanging, and they prevent stormwater runoff issues in our lakes. And they can look good as well. They're not always an eyesore. We do understand folks, property owners' concerns that not able to manage or recreate on their property. So what do we allow? Historic ice ridge removal, we allow up to 15 feet on residential lots, 25 on commercial. Required to have stabilization on the side slope. We want to make sure that vegetation is established and that none of the topsoil is deposited in a wetland or lake. Annual ice ridges, we allow annual removal without a permit, but you want to have erosion sediment control, BMPs installed. So those are the restrictions. Okay, boardwalks, stairways, and landings. We allow up to a 4-foot stairway or landing, things like that in SIZ, in the shore impact zone. Outside the shore impact zone, we don't regulate that. Boardwalks, we allow up to 8 feet wide. The intent on boardwalks is to go over wetlands with no wetland violation. We allow up to 8 feet wide. Decks are not allowed in the shore impact zone. However, we do allow a 4-foot walkway for access. Okay, and now we're introducing the concept of SIZ 1, 2, and the rear lot zone. We've probably chatted about this in the past, but all lakes have a setback, the building setback. Here's a proposed structure. Building setback on a GD lake is 75 feet, RD is 100, national environment is 150, and then the special shallow is 180. 75-foot setback on a GD is split up into 2 zones. The SIZ2, which is the second half of SIZ, and then 37.5 feet is the first half of the SIZ. The reason we split that up is because we have certain items where, when applied for, have even more strict regulations. The closer you get to water, over and above what's in the Minnesota shoreline rules. So for example, a patio is a perfect example of that. We allow patios within the SIZ, within the building setback, up to 400 square feet with a stormwater management plan, or 250 without, but it needs to be an SIZ 2. They're not allowed in SIZ 1 unless it's used as a water-oriented accessory structure no bigger than 120 square feet. So patios don't require a permit in the rear lot zone though. So patios have specific requirements, and if you've already got existing patios on the site that are bigger than this, those are existing legal nonconformities, and if you try to add new patios or things like that, you're going to run into a problem because of too much aggregate patios. We do allow retaining walls in the SIZ with a permit, up to 4 feet tall. If they're more than 4 feet, they need an engineered plan so that they're constructed appropriate, and we count the dirt moving with it. Okay, dirt moving. We count cut and fill. Dirt moving that's regulated is anything that's not associated with the construction of a structure or a building. Basically landscaping, sand blankets, landscaping your yard, retaining walls, things like that. You're allowed up to 30 cubic yards in SIZ 1, 50 in SIZ 2, and 100 in the rear lot zone. One thing to keep in mind though, that you can't exceed these totals in a 3-year period, otherwise you need a conditional use permit, basically permission from our planning commission, our board of adjustment to do so. So there's a little bit of sideboard there that we do allow limited dirt moving, but if it's done excessively and repeatedly within a 3-year period, we want to make sure that's handled with a conditional use permit so that we can get stormwater management and really focus in on any other conditions that we need to have. There's a couple of other conditions in here as well, but just looking at my clock, I'm running a bit short of time. So the next thing I want to chat about is, I'm going to skip right to this graphic. Vegetation removal standards, and this is one of the last things I want to talk about. We, outside of steep slopes and bluffs, so pretend the steep slope and the bluff doesn't exist right now, right? We know there's special vegetation removal requirements in steep slopes and bluffs. And we're gonna put that in the parking lot over here. So this is a normal lot that doesn't have the bluff or the steep slope. We have the rear lot zone, which is where a house can be built behind a line. We don't have any regulation of any vegetation removal outside in the rear lot zone. We also don't regulate vegetation removal in SIZ 2, again, if there's no bluff or steep slope. You could clear it if you wanted to, right? We would discourage it, but it's not illegal. The only place that we regulate vegetation removal is once you get inside SIZ 1. Then we allow up to a 15-foot wide access to the shoreline at the edge, and then only inside the rec area will we allow a rec area 30% of the width of the lot, 25 feet back. So that's where you can put your sand blanket, clear vegetation, put your dock in. You need a permit for that, for sure, and I recommend a site visit prior to permitting with staff so we can go over that with you. But just know, once you get inside SIZ 1, sacred area, gonna want to make sure you chat with our staff to make sure it's okay. And this area just articulates that writing and it talks more about that. Water-oriented accessory structures are allowed. They cannot be for human habitation. There's size and height limitations on them. They need to be 20 feet back from OHW, 120 square feet, 12 feet mid-peak. We're really seeing folks push the limits on these. Adding plumbing, a sink, a tiki bar, as long as it's 120 square feet or less and not for human habitation, it is what it is. So you can only have one on the property. Couple of danger areas to be aware of. We know that riprap doesn't require a permit from the county. We are seeing instances where people are putting riprap in without a permit because we let them, but then in the back side of it, they cleared the historic ice ridge, cleared all of the vegetation, saying that they need to do it in order to put the riprap in. If you're exceeding, if you don't have a permit to do the clearing or the rec area, then you do need a permit from the county because that's above OHW and that's the county standards. So anytime you're installing riprap, I would suggest a phone call to our staff to ensure that the installation of that isn't going to unintentionally violate any of the county's rules. There's a few other exempt areas that don't need permits. Just again, looking at my clock here. We will save this PowerPoint presentation and record it. You can be sure to look at these other exempt activities as well. We do exempt, for example, dirt moving in driveways, to build a driveway, you know, certain utility projects, things like that. Maintenance of a sand blanket, stuff like that. Also keep in mind that if you're within 500 feet of the Mississippi River, there's completely new not new, but different regulations over and above the counties through their own comprehensive plan. Please check with the county to understand how those regulations are different than the normal regulations, and that is through the Mississippi Headwaters Board and their regulatory authority. Last thing, this is the only thing I'm talking about with wetlands. Usually I have a half-hour presentation on wetlands. The only thing I want to chat about with wetlands is we have had a number of instances where customers will come to the counter. They'll be presented with the National Wetland Inventory map. The National Wetland Inventory was an inventory of all wetlands shot from basically an airplane and at somebody's desk. The National Wetland Inventory is not ground truth, and it's highly inaccurate at scales that are above like a section level. Because remember, we have section townships and then counties. So if you're zoomed in more than a section, the boundaries are just not going to be accurate. So here's an example of two properties where the National Wetland Inventory suggested the wetlands were over this area shaded in blue, and that the rest of this property, specifically this area, had no wetlands. When we actually performed the wetland delineation, as you can see on the ground truthing, the wetland boundary completely changed, and there was much more wetland on the northeast side. That's why if you're shown an image of the National Wetland Inventory and you hear that according to the National Wetland Inventory there's no wetlands, it doesn't really mean there's no wetlands on the property. It's just an indication of possible wetlands from an aerial photo analysis. So really keep that in mind. Here is my favorite example of a National Wetland Inventory, what I call, quote, fail. Here we show the National Inventory wrapped around the south side, not even close to the edge of the lake here, right? There's no wetlands anywhere in here. It's all to the south. An actual wetland delineation was performed on both these properties. Both properties were entirely consisting of wetlands except for the road. So they were all wetlands. Somebody bought the property and wanted to develop it with the understanding that there was no wetlands, and it was just completely different information. What's the area that is the safest? Get a wetland delineation performed by a professional, and they can help you do the ground truthing. Also, just because something is a lawn, this is Birchdale Road in North Longling, doesn't mean it's not a wetland. Wetlands are protected, you can't impact them, you can't do dirt moving in wetlands. And so this is actually a wetland that looks like a lawn, including in the front, but it still functions as a wetland. What can you do in a wetland? You can do limited fills with a permit from the county and with our expertise. So if you're thinking of doing anything in a wetland, please stop by the county or ask your environmental services specialist about the rules. They can help you out. Okay, so that wraps up, and that was, by the way, I could spend probably 3 hours on our shoreline alteration rules and our county rules for dirt moving, things like that. That was very, very quick, and I'm sure there's probably some other questions regarding those types of rules. But having said that, at this time, I do want to move on to a little bit on our public hearing process and overview. so that folks, real estate agents or others that are representing clients, we've had landscapers, we've had a lot of different folks attend our public hearings representing clients. And we just want to have probably a better understanding of what that process is and why it's in place. So this is our public hearing process overview. Okay, so this is about 15 minutes here. I might get done slightly early with this. All right, so the types of processes for land use allowances that we have in the county. The first thing is there are some things that we allow with no permit, right? So you could put a driveway in, you don't need a permit from us. Now, the highway department might require you to do an entrance permit, but our office, we don't require dirt moving permits for driveways. That's an example of that. We don't require a permit for a patio in the rear lot zone or outside the shoreland district. You can just build it, no permit. Some things are allowed with a permit. For example, a new house or rebuilding a house or building a deck. Those require a permit, but you don't need to get special permission. If you meet the requirements of the permit, you get the permit. Other things are allowed with what's called a conditional use permit, which means you need to go through a special board and a public process to get permission to do something, and it's not guaranteed. There are other things that are allowed within the zoning district, but not in certain places on properties. For example, houses are allowed in shoreland district zoning, but they're not allowed within the SIZ. They're not allowed, they have to meet all setbacks. If you want to build a house that's not meeting the setbacks, then you need a variance. And that's another permission that you would get from a board that's not guaranteed. There are other things that we have in the county that are not allowed in the zoning district at all. And you can't seek a variance for that. For example, if I wanted to put an airport on my property in the shoreland district, airports are not allowed on my property, and I can't just get a variance for it. I would need to change the zoning first of my property to an airport district. Also, if you want to develop certain kinds of subdivisions, if it's less than a certain number of lots, you can just get it through a permit approved at the county. However, if it's certain kinds of lots or a certain number, then we require you to go through a platting process, which involves public hearing and a permission that's not exactly guaranteed. So I'm setting you up because what I want to talk about is what does it mean when I say a conditional use permit or a variance or a zoning change or a plat is needed? I'm not going to talk much about the permit or the no permit, but what are these special permissions here? Okay, so let's talk about conditional use permits first. Conditional use permit is the zoning exception that allows you to use your property in a non-conforming way. It's generally allowed as long as you meet the standards of the ordinance and any conditions that the Board of Adjustment puts on it. Examples of things that need conditional use permits: extractive use, resorts, campgrounds, excessive dirt moving, and home businesses, and many, many other items. There's a lot of conditional use permits that are in our land use table. Conditional use permits, approval or denial is granted by the Board of Adjustment. Board of Adjustment consists of 5 folks in different areas of the county that are appointed by our County Board of Commissioners. So they're appointed positions, and they sit on a panel and they make decisions that are absolute with conditional use permits and variances. So they have a specific set of questions that they answer when there's a conditional use permit application. Some of those questions can be answered no by the Board of Adjustment. I'm not going to go through each one of these questions, but suffice to say that they'll go through these questions and ask themselves, does this proposal meet the intent of the ordinance, and is it considering all of these factors? And they'll list the reasons why or why not they are meeting these criteria. At the end of the questions, if they feel like it's adequate, they'll vote. If they approve it, they'll place appropriate conditions on the use depending on the scope and scale of the project. Variance requests are different than conditional use permits. Variance is an exception to a zoning restriction that allows the use of the land outside the requirements of the zoning for that area. It's only under a narrow range of conditions and circumstances, generally intended to be rare. Common variance requests, I want to build a house 60 feet from OHW where 75 feet is allowed. I want to build a house within the bluff impact zone, or I want to build it closer to the side yard setback, or I want to build it bigger or taller than what I'm allowed. Typically dimensional variances. A variance is approved or denied by the Board of Adjustment, not the county board, just like a conditional use permit. So questions that need to be answered yes by the Board of Adjustment, there are 6 of them. And each one of these questions has to be answered yes, otherwise the variance is denied. And if they grant a yes to these questions, then they can attach, again, appropriate conditions for that approval so that the use is allowed with some restrictions. That's, once you get through the entire public hearing processes, this is how those things get approved. So what is this public hearing process? How does it get from an idea in an applicant's head all the way to the Board of Adjustments where they just made those decisions, where they go through those questions? So the first step is when we have a customer that's interested in doing something and we discover that this doesn't quite fit what's the intent of the ordinance or has a special process, we're going to have them attend a development review team meeting. So they would apply for a development review team meeting. These meetings bring together the applicant, the township, and other agencies and staff to ensure that the use they're thinking about is considered before an actual application for the variance is submitted. It's a free meeting, no decisions are made, no surveys required, just a site plan. We'll look at the history of the property, we talk about stormwater, we talk about some alternative options, and we provide those applicants with information. Again, it's important to understand that the development review team meeting is just a preliminary idea or a thought or a concept for discussion. It isn't their final site plan, and they might change some ideas. It's just to make sure they're going down the right path and they have all the information they need as they think about actually applying for it. So they haven't yet applied for a variance yet. They've only applied for the dirt meeting. Once they go through the dirt meeting and they get the information, if they're serious about what they want to do, they're going to apply for a public hearing item. So that means I want to change the zoning or get a variance or a conditional use permit. Once they're serious about it, then they need to officially apply for that. That means they need to pay their fee, $500 plus a $46 recording fee, complete an application, get a survey done, unless it's a zoning change, then it's not required. They need to meet all of the standards in writing of the appropriate section of the ordinance. So that means for a resort, you have to meet all of Article 34. They need an authorized agent form, septic compliance, or a new design or a new install within 5 years. And then once they apply, we make a decision within 60 days, unless there's mitigating circumstances. When we get an application that's not complete, sometimes that causes a tabling at our Board of Adjustments, unclear site facts, and potential customer delays. So we always say, when you hand in an application, make sure you're meeting all of the standards that are required. The next step, step 3, is we publish notices. We publish those in the newspaper a minimum of 10 days before the hearing, statutory requirement, and then we publish these requests to a radius surrounding the property. 500 feet for variances, 1320 for CUPs, and 2600 for plats and zoning changes. It's required by statute. We also send those requests to townships, other agencies, lake associations, etc., for their comment as well. The next step after that is they attend an on-site meeting on the property 2 weeks prior to public hearing. Our Board of Adjustment attends with the staff and the applicant. We're also inviting the township moving forward. The project is staked. The Board of Adjustment makes observations, takes pictures, and it's a very, very important part of the process. Then finally, we attend the public hearing. you can either attend virtually or beginning in May, for the first time in a long time, you can actually attend in person. So the public is invited to attend. The Board of Adjustment makes the decisions for variances and CUPs. Otherwise, the Planning Commission for zoning changes and ordinance revisions simply makes recommendations. The county board will make the final decision on those. The request is read into the record. The applicant can comment. We'll take public testimony. Then we do an on-site report with photos. Then the board goes through their findings of fact, answers yes or no, and then they make a decision, and then any conditions are applied. Step 5 is, once you're done with that, you still need a permit to actually build what you want to build. And step 6, which is optional, is if you disagree with the decision, you can appeal to district court or the Court of Appeals. For CUPs, that can be done within 60 days, and for variances within 30 days. So this is, I think, one of my last slides. Typically, it's a 6 to 8 week process from start to finish. Really important to understand that if you're thinking about a variance or things like that, that this is not a quick week to 10 day like a permit process. So for example, if you are on this track, on this bottom line, the last day to schedule a DIRT meeting is January 17th. This is the hypothetical from last year. Your DIRT meeting is on January 27th. Then you have to submit your application by February 26th. The onsite is March 5th, and the actual meeting isn't until March 19th. And if it's for a plat, you're looking at not getting onto the county board until April 14th. So for a variance, you're talking about 8 weeks, almost 10 weeks for a plat. So it's a fairly lengthy process. We try to go as fast as we can, but there are some minimum statutory requirements that we have to abide by. So that was a very quick windshield driving at 50 miles per hour down the highway look at the public hearing process, but hopefully that helps you understand what folks go through, timelines, and how these decisions are getting made. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is very briefly, this won't take too long, go through an easy tutorial on our interactive map. And to do so, I am going to go to our webpage. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to crowin.us course. And then we've got, I think, a very visually appealing web page. I think it's pretty easy to navigate. You're going to go down to see this icon that says County Maps. You're going to click on County Maps. Once you go there, there's a lot of map options. It can be confusing. I would skip to the top where it says Interactive Maps. You're just going to click Interactive Map. And then there is a map that's made for mobile devices, so it's formatted a bit differently. And then we have a public GIS public mapping service that's made for more of a desktop environment. So if you're doing it on your desktop computer, you want to click on this. It's going to give you a warning that you're leaving the county's safe environment and exiting to a third-party site. So you're going to say proceed. Depending on how fast your computer is, it'll take a bit to load. Once you get into it, you will see that a map of the county is in front of you, and then there's a bunch of options at the top of your screen. One of the there's three extremely important, actually probably four, but the three big ones we're going to talk about are, the first one we're going to talk about is, if we hover over the top of it, is your layer list. You're going to click on layer list, and when you click on that, you'll get a list of layers that are available to you. Remember, we talked about before that you can look up the FEMA floodplain layer. So this on the left-hand side under water features, FEMA flood hazard data. If you click on that, that's going to pick up your floodplain layer. Let's just say you want to know what the zoning is on your parcel. Then you would click the Crow Wing County land use layer, and that'll give you the zoning that's on your parcel. There are a lot of different layers to mess around with on here, and I'd encourage you, if you have some time, to go through this. And here's your 2-foot contours to help with your stormwater management plan. There is just a lot of information in here for you to peruse. So you can toggle them on and off. The other thing that is on this map is a search feature. That's the second most important one. It's this vernacular called search. You can search by a PIN number. Is it 8? It's an 8-digit PID number. Some people call it a PIN number or PID. They're synonymous with each other. You can type that in, and when you search on it and click search, it'll zoom to that parcel. Or you can scroll to the right and search by physical address. You can also search by lakes. You can search by permit number. There's a variety of ways to search for different things. The other thing you can do is if you just don't know the PID number or the address, or you're like, you know, it's that one property that's, I don't know, it's right off of County Road 127. You can zoom in with your scroll button on your mouse, just like I'm doing, scrolling with the wheel, or you can hold the shift key down and drag a box over the top of it, zoom in, and see what's going on. Once you zoom in far enough, you're like, I think this is the parcel. Then we're going to go to the third icon that we discussed, which is the identify icon. You're going to click the identify icon. This allows you to select a property and interact with it. So you're going to click select one, click the parcel. It'll turn blue, and a new box will pop up with some information about who owns it. Once you get into that, you can look at the permit history, the tax statements, and a bunch of other drawings. I particularly enjoy looking at the permit history. So after you click the I button and you see this drop-down list, go to County Permits, select that, and select Go. And then it'll show you all of the permits that have been approved on that particular property, along with relevant information. If you want to actually interact with what was inside that permit, you're going to click the link on the left-hand side, and it'll allow you to get into those permits to see the history, and then you can simply scroll through it. If you're done with the box, you just exit out of it and go from there. Now, there are many other features on this interactive map that you can peruse and interact with. There is also a measuring device that I find particularly handy. So what you can do is you can click on this symbol here, and you'll see it pops up a new box. You can click to start drawing, double click to end it, and you just measured a segment. You can change the geometry of it. You can measure an area to get square footage. This will help you, as you're building a site plan, understand where the setbacks are from road right-of-way or property lines. I find it a pretty handy tool. If you want to print out a document, you can create your own printout by clicking this print icon, calling it, we'll just call it Chad's property, because it is. And then I made it, so I'm going to call it myself. It's going to be a PDF. So I'm going to click print. The wheels will spin for a bit, depending on how fast your computer is. Oh, pop-up's blocked. Sorry. One moment. So that's a great reminder to turn off your pop-up blocker. Let's try this again. Otherwise, your print screen will not work. Let's just see if I got this right. Yeah, there we go. So now you see an image of Chad's property. You can go to your printer icon and print it off, and it's set. You can also download it or save it. You can save this as your site plan if you want to draw your site plan right over the top of an aerial photo and bring that in. So a lot of different things you can do with the interactive map, a lot of different legend items to interact with and sort of peruse. So I think for now, we will leave that one alone. If you have other questions, you can always call our customer service staff, 218 824-1010, and they can help you through it, or go to our county webpage. Okay, with that, I think we will shift gears to my final topic of the day before our Soil and Water Conservation District has some more information about where their role intersects with the county and what services they provide. And wanted to chat about, oh, I forgot, I do have some information on our online permitting and how to apply for a permit online. I will save that here for reference. You can always refer to our step-by-step guide on how to approve, or I'm sorry, how to apply for a land use permit. Okay, so we just went through a extensive review process of our land use ordinance. We had about 46 revisions to the land use ordinance. It was last revised in the fall of 2017. Some of our proposed changes did not end up being approved as a result of some agency comments. So you'll see that as I go through it. If you see any strikeouts, it means it didn't quite make the final approval. We had a 30-day public comment period, February through March. We received 5 comments. We had the public hearing on March 30th. The county board approved the changes on April 13th, and they become effective May 13th. It's in our ordinance that we need at least 30 days before they become effective. So it's good timing right now to talk about some of the changes that we're going to see. Okay. Unfortunately, with 46 different changes, I didn't have a lot of time to add some really cool and fun, colorful graphics to these. It is what it is. It's a table, right? It's going to be a little bit boring here to go row by row, but I think it'll get the job done. If there's questions that come up during this, I'll do my best to answer them, but I'm just going to keep rolling through them, especially if there's not a lot of intersection between some practical changes on the ground. So one of the first things we looked at doing was changing the land use districts on Pine Beach Road, County Road 77. That failed, of course, so there is no zoning changes on County Road 77. So we're gonna move past that one. Number 2 is we wanted to take a look at making sure our ordinance was in conformance with a Minnesota statute to make sure that commercial uses as well as residential uses can be allowed to continue if they're non-conforming or rebuilt if done within statute. So we simply updated our ordinance to make sure that that language was fairly tight for both commercial and non-commercial. Number 3 was again a little bit of make sure our ordinance aligns with statute. Right now, our ordinance just says that if the use of a structure ceases for more than a year, and it's non-conforming, that it can't be continued. But there's other statutory language, a use or a structure that's non-conforming for a year that can continue. That's in our ordinance, but we added some more language to ensure that if there's a natural disaster or a fire, that you have 180 days from that disaster to apply for the permit, and then you have our permit 2 years to rebuild it. So we added a little bit more language to clarify the difference between ceasing a use and when something gets destroyed by fire or peril, that you have a different timeline. So again, this wasn't exactly very scandalous stuff here. They're technically a change, but practically on the ground, not much. The next change we did was we revised and repackaged our requirements for a certificate of surveys. It was all over the board in our ordinance. There was lots of different sections, as you can see, where we required it. We packaged that into a new Article 44, where it basically says, here's the survey requirements for applications. Again, it's not going to cause any changes on the ground. It's more of a repackage, make it cleaner, easier to read. The other thing we did, one moment, is change number 5 was we spelled out better with our legal counsel what is the process for appealing CUPs, variances? We took away the county auditor from the process and just said, you can appeal and submit your stuff right to the zoning administrator. It just seemed odd to submit it to the county auditor, so we made that clear that it can be submitted directly to me, and then that goes to the district court. Again, not exactly a change in practice on the ground. The next few changes that we have here directly relate to some on-the-ground practices. Change number 6 is we are now allowing cemetery plats if they need to meet statutory requirements for cemetery plats, but we're going to treat them as an administrative subdivision and have an application process for them. So if there's private cemeteries that are going in, that they aren't just recorded, that they go through our survey review process as an administrative subdivision, and that they need to, just so we have a second pair of eyes to make sure they're consistent with setbacks, state law, and a county process. So right now, state law just says they need to meet state law, and now what we're saying is we need to review them as well. The next change is to require that all, the current ordinance says that all deeds after an administrative subdivision must be filed within 90 days. We felt that was too limiting, and so we're going to allow 1 year to file a deed after administrative subdivision to record that and make the split happen. And we might take a look at that again in the future to see if we need even more time. But we feel that that will be good customer service. The next thing deals with administrative subdivision requirements. There's been some confusion among septic professionals and surveyors about what's required. Here, the law states that any new lot created after 1996 must have 2 suitable locations for an SSTS or septic system on any new lot created after 1996. So the confusion was that if you have a parent lot with the house on it and you're splitting off from that, does the parent lot that was already an original lot need to have 2 systems? We're saying from MPCA guidance, yes, they do. The house is one, plus they need an alternate septic system on the parent lot. So again, a lot of in the weeds stuff, but important that we clarify that it needs 2 sites per septic system. The next item, number 9, deals with plat design standards and a lot of language follow-up to talk about minimum lot sizes. One of the more popular things that we've seen is commercial storage units having a plat around the storage unit, and then they'll go through a platting process and then sell the storage units individually. What we're saying here is for non-residential subdivisions involving commercial storage buildings divided into separate lots, there's not going to be a minimum lot size variance that we're going to require if they're simply platting land over the top of the storage unit to just sell the unit itself, because it's clearly for a real estate transaction for a storage unit placed over the top of it. So that'll eliminate the need to request a variance for those types of deals. We're also saying that resort conversions that involve just simply placing a postage stamp sized lot over the top of existing resort units, those don't need a variance for lot size so long as they're the existing buildings and they're clearly intended to just sell the units themselves. And we're not going to look for a variance for lot size on that because that wasn't the intent. We're also clarifying that conservation developments for residential developments don't need to meet minimum lot sizes, even though they don't anyway per statute. It's just now we're saying it in our ordinance. So that's not a deviation of any way. It's just clarification, making it clear for everyone to understand where we need to deviate from minimum lot size standards. This is not a gateway to try and get rid of any lot standards for any development of any kind. It's a very narrow scoped thing to address these existing houses or these commercial storage areas where it's just platting the units inside to be sold. The other thing that we did was we updated our land use table to address word changes and different concepts. We tried to address travel trailers and to add some more uses for travel trailers. Following DNR comment, that wasn't something we were able to do. I'll get into travel trailers in a bit, but we've added the ability for folks to have 3-family dwellings, triplexes, quads. They're addressed in our land use table now. Event centers are for the first time addressed, and we addressed the concept of a non-commercial storage yard and what that means and where it's allowed versus a commercial storage yard. And we also made some edits to the single, 2-family, and multifamily dwelling in terms of verbiage. I'd say the more significant ones were the top additions, where we're allowing 3- and 4-family triplexes and quads if they meet minimum lot size, buildable area, and standards of lot widths, specifically spelled out in the ordinance. And event centers are going to be allowed with a CUP in certain areas. That's just keeping up with the times. They've been popular for at least 10 to 15 years, and I think our ordinance just needs to keep up with that. So that's a little bit on what the land use table is doing. Change number 11 was specifying where duplexes and triplexes and quad homes are permitted, conditioned or prohibited. And we've amended a table to address the minimum lot size standards for those. And then we've consolidated Article 11 for duplexes and et cetera into a new article so that it's easier to read about these multifamily homes and what's allowed. Generally speaking, the duplexes, triplexes, and quads are also going to be allowed outside the shoreline district now, but the rule is that the lot must be at least as big as what the zoning allows for, and then we would allow 1 duplex. So for example, if you have a property that's zoned rural residential 2.5, and the actual acres on the ground is 1.5, because you're not meeting the minimum size of the zoning, you couldn't have a duplex without a variance. However, if you have a 3-acre property zoned rural residential 2.5, then you could have a duplex with just a permit. So that's a little bit of the change on that one to allow some flexibility there. Change 12 was just to add an event center. We also changed the definition of an event center so that retail sales and liquor sales would be allowed as part of the event center if it gets approved, unless a condition doesn't allow it. Change 13 was travel trailers. We tried to make a change to allow an additional travel trailer on a property. So the current rule right now is a travel trailer is treated as a dwelling unit. You're allowed a primary house and a guest cottage. So that means on a vacant lot, you can have 2 travel trailers. One travel trailer would be the house, and the second one would be the guest cottage. We were trying to allow for a consideration to allow 1 travel trailer in addition to a house and a guest cottage. We did receive feedback from DNR that wouldn't be possible with shoreline rules because it would be exceeding the lot density standards. So that's not something we were able to make the change. And so we're treating our travel trailers, RVs, as they currently are right now. We also distinguish between commercial storage yards and non-commercial storage yards by making definition changes. Generally, commercial storage yards are where you're storing other people's things or things that are being sold. And those are commercial storage yards. For example, other people's boat trailers or shrink-wrapped people's boats. Those are common commercial storage yards. Or you have cargo containers that you're selling to people. Those are commercial. Whereas we've changed the non-commercial storage yard to say that if you just have your things that you use for your own personal use, like you have several trucks or several items like that, those are not commercial storage yards and they're for your own use. And so we've distinguished those and added some different standards to those. We've also changed, going down to the next change, bluff setbacks for septic systems. That was always something we did, but it didn't actually say in the ordinance. Now we finally added in the ordinance that septic systems cannot be placed in the bluff impact zone without a variance. Again, sort of an unwritten rule. We've added it to the table. So they need to be located outside of 30 feet from the toe or the top, unless they have a variance. The other item, number 16, is just sort of technical in nature, talking about when it's dealing with floodplains and when the lowest level needs to be at or above RFP in certain circumstances. I won't go through this in particular unless someone has questions about it, but it's more technical in nature. There was a requirement in our ordinance that required a septic system assessment with all shoreland permits, and it's not required per state law. And we've removed that assessment and maintenance requirement. It hasn't been applied in practice anyway by staff or by this office for many years. We've got good compliance inspection. We think we've got good maintenance on the landscape. We didn't think this was necessary, particularly because the state law has changed that anytime you have a compliance inspection, it's required to be pumped anyway. So we didn't see the need to have this additional requirement in place anymore, so we removed that. We clarified this section on walkways, just making it more clear that you can only have one walkway in SIZ, and this is how big it can be, and just a little more clarity on stuff we were doing on the ground anyway. The next change we made was with our guest cottages. We clarified that the guest cottages, the size is not limited to just the building footprint, but the livable area, even for a guest cottage, is the livable area, not just the footprint. So it's got a height restriction of 15 feet for a guest cottage, but also a livable area for both guest quarters and guest cottages. And what that does is that really gets at if there are folks that want to add a basement or something like that that would add some more livable area, but technically still be 700 square feet. The intent of the shoreline rule on that 700 square feet was to get at the livable area on the inside. So it's a slight change, but really meets the intent with what we were looking for, which was, rather than a footprint, a kind of a livable area in both circumstances. And that same thing goes for outside the shoreline district, that it would be the 900 square feet. So a slight clarification there. Many times there's probably not going to be an issue on this one. We don't typically have issues with it. We also added clarification that if you're doing ground-mounted solar projects or solar panels, that if you want to put an accessory structure that's 150 square feet next to it, we're not going to count the solar panel as one of your less than 160 square foot structures and count that against you. You can still have a shed. This deals with the fact that we allow up to 2 cumulative 160 square foot sheds without a permit. And we're saying that the solar panels on the property don't count against that limit. We've changed the pool stuff a lot. Pools were prohibited in SIZ1 and limited to 400 square feet in SIZ2 and the rear lot zone, and we required a dirt moving limit applied to it. What we've done is we've said they're still not allowed in SIZ1, they're still limited to 400 square feet in SIZ2, but there is no limitation on the size of pools in the rear lot zone, and we're not going to count dirt moving with it. It's just like building any other structure. So that's a relaxation of the pool rule. And pools are impervious, so it doesn't mean that somebody can build a 10,000 square foot pool and blow over their impervious. It'll be caught by the impervious calculations. We made a change to water-oriented accessory structures. Item number 22, what we clarified that is, look, if you have a patio plus a shed, as a water-oriented accessory structure, you can have both so long as they both don't exceed 120 square feet and they're contiguous to each other. That was something we were doing in practice anyway, but we made sure that it was in the ordinance for clarification. Change 23 is we added more robust language to what a bridge is versus a boardwalk and when we're going to require a permit or not, depending on if you're in the shoreland district or outside the shoreland district. This is due to confusion about how to handle boardwalks and bridges outside the shoreland district or within SIZ or outside the SIZ, even for staff. It was becoming a bit cumbersome. So this clarifies it much better, and we created a new Article 18 to address those issues. Number 24 is watercraft access ramps. We are clarifying that the ordinance right now says you can never fill a wetland for a watercraft access ramp. We've said that you could fill a wetland for a watercraft access ramp so long as you get permission through a wetland replacement plan, which is the proper place to make sure those things are vetted. Dirt moving. We removed, we attempted to remove the requirement that private roads and driveways be screened from public waters. That actually didn't work because the DNR said that that's not compatible with the shoreline rules, but we did remove the requirement that driveways have to be screened from neighboring properties, which we weren't doing in practice anyway. But it was a little bit of a silly requirement. I think most people listening here would say, I didn't know you required screening driveways from your neighbor. It says it in the ordinance, but we took that out. But technically, we have to screen from the lake. We haven't typically applied that standard though. Dirt moving, we just made some clarification on the language. We did try to increase the allotment of dirt moving in a commercial area. That also wasn't going to be allowed by the DNR, so we took that out. We also, on change 27, made some clarifications that we need to make sure we're not exceeding our maximum thresholds in each zone for dirt moving every 3 years. So we updated the language to make sure that was clear. This next dirt moving one actually didn't go through as well. We were going to not require a dirt moving permit for active erosion issues as long as they got permission from the Soil and Water Conservation District and a site plan. That was something that wasn't going to be allowed by the DNR as well, so that did not get passed. We also, on change 29, added language exempting certain agricultural buildings from height requirements. That was to just add clarity of, can I still have agriculture in certain zoning districts, and to clarify when the height exemptions would be allowed. Okay, so the next item for commercial standards was a bit significant. We had 3 road setbacks. We had, for commercial properties, 40, 120, and 35. They were confusing. They were not consistent. It didn't say where. So we removed all of the setback commercial languages and made one standard, all setbacks at 35 feet for all public roads. So that simplifies that. We also added a provision that all new commercial operations or commercial additions need to be ADA compliance, and any bleacher additions, which are pretty rare. And what that means is we'll have to contract out through an ADA specialist, the Americans with Disability Act, to make sure that commercial plans are being reviewed for ADA accessibility. This is to meet state statute that counties are responsible for. So there's a little bit of the commercial standards. Article 31 is not worth mentioning. That's old language from old campground language that talks about class 1, 2, 3, and 5. There's no such thing. We clarified a couple of extracted use languages, but nothing that would change anything on the ground, just old language in the ordinance that we eliminated. On the residential and resort developments, one of the things that we did there, again, was we talked more about the lot sizes, and I've already chatted about this earlier, and when there's flexibility to deviate from the minimum lot size depending on the type of setup you have and what's required. So that's the development standards there. We also made sure on change number 34 that we were meeting minimum planned unit development standards by adding language that says that the number of mooring spaces allowed for resorts is equal to the number of allowable dwelling units in the first tier, just like residential development standards. So we knew that wasn't in our ordinance. We added it in there because the statute requires it. So more of just matching the state requirements. Change 35 was screening and fencing standards. We added language to clarify where there's conflictions between the shoreline rules and screening and fence standards, that the shoreline rules win. We clarified that on frontage roads, as determined by the zoning administrator, we may not require screening where it faces a 4-lane highway, where the benefits of screening just aren't there. So we clarified where certain areas we don't need to screen if there's a large frontage highway area. Big change in item number 36. I'm going to boil this down by just simply saying that we are no longer going to be requiring compliance inspections for permits outside of the shoreline district that are for non-sewage generating additions. Okay, so that means compliance inspections will not be required for permits outside the shoreline district for accessory structures, rough reconstruction, or covered or open decks. And so that's really the idea there is we're just not going to require that. We really felt that the compliance inspections for the most part are good, and that so long as we keep requiring them for the shoreline district, I think we're doing a good job of protecting our groundwater and ground surface quality. 37, so we're getting close. I think I'm still right on schedule. Got 7 minutes. We are removing the provision to require holding tanks to have operating permits. State law does not require that anyway. We had it in the books as being required. We do feel that the current management plans for holding tanks are adequate, and that if the landowner pumps it regularly and is following their management plan that's given to them, that we're going to be just fine. Typically, holding tanks have an alarm. It's required anyway that goes off. That sends notification of issues. And so at this point, we feel due to they don't typically have high issues with like commercial systems where they're having BODs that are excessive, and these are residential holding tanks in seasonally intermittent use areas that we didn't feel operating permits was something we needed to continue to do there. 39 was we are now officially requiring that anytime you attempt to impact a wetland, you must get an exemption from the county in written, and there's an application, all that kind of stuff. Whereas before, technically the state law said, look, if you can fill by law, you can just do it. In practice, we were requiring a notice of decision, but now it officially says it. Number 40 is just a clarification of how we calculate the size of signs. 41 is just adding that you can't direct stormwater into wetlands as well as public waters per law. 42 is we have regulations for solar energy systems now, which means that we're requiring permits for solar panels that are ground mounted, but if they're on the roof, they don't need a permit so long as they're flush with the roof. So we've been doing that in practice, but now we've added it to the table. We've added or amended a number of definitions: hotel, motel, event center, sign. We modified the definition of some definitions. So, you know, take a look at these. We've done a number of developments that, I'm sorry, a number of definition changes to make sure they're consistent. We corrected some OHW, BFEs, and regulatory floodplain elevation areas to correct things that were inconsistent with the DNR. And the last change we made was basically any spelling errors, typos, flow. We've added a lot of different navigational tools to get through the ordinance. So that was a lot. That was a lot. My voice is slightly hoarse at this point, getting through that last one. That was it can be a bit dry going through those ordinance revisions. Our next person on tap here is the Soil and Water Conservation District. What I think I'm going to do is for 5 minutes, does anybody have quick questions on the ordinance revision stuff that I just went over? Okay. I see we have Adam Molesky with our Soil and Water Conservation District office downstairs in the Land Services building. Soil and Water Conservation District has been an excellent partner with Crow Wing County. We're so happy to have a strong relationship with them. And I think it's just getting better every year. Adam, I think has switched roles recently, so I don't know, Adam, if you want to chat about that. They have some excellent opportunities for property owners and contractors and can help folks get where they need to go. So without further ado, I will mute myself and let Adam chat.
Can you hear me? Weird.
We can hear you now, Adam.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. Yes.
Perfect. So just like Jake had said, I'm Adam with Crow Wing Soil and Water, and I'll be talking a little bit about how we assist the county as well as landowners. I know a big portion of today's topic was about stormwater management plans, and we certainly have some expertise on how to design those, what should be planted, things like that. So I'll cover a little bit that in my talk, but first couple things I'm going to go over. Ignore my COVID hair in this picture. This was taken like mid-pandemic, so my hair is a little long in this picture, but so we do, if you've never been to our website, we have a new website. So if you're used to the old one or you've never been to our website, if you just Google search Crow Wing Soil and Water, you can see our website. It's new, so feel free to play around with that. If you have any questions, always feel free to give us a call. But we have a new website. Hopefully it looks nice and adds some ease for landowners to find things, things like that. We also came out with a new plat book. It's the 2021, and Jake showed you the interactive map today. This is a hard copy, and it goes by township. The only thing with the plat books is they only will list the landowner's name 5 acres or more. Just with those small lots, it gets too many names to list. So if this does interest you, we have new 2021 plat books that are up to date with current parcel data, They look very similar to the interactive map, but they list out who owns the property and how many acres and things like that. So feel free to check that out. It is on our website to order as well. We also have an annual tree sale coming up. Our pickup day is going to be May 6th and 7th. We are fastly approaching getting towards 1 million trees. So if you didn't order this year and you're like, shoot, I didn't even know they had that, feel free to next year order, or we still have some trees left this year. So feel free to call us and see what we have left. We really only have trees left. We don't have any native plants, things like that, but our tree sale will kick off January 1st of next year. So feel free, if you missed it this year, either check with us to see what we have left or plan for ordering next year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our programs and what we offer here at Crowing Soil and Water. So we do everything from, forest management to technical guidance, to education. We do conservation easements, and this can be found on our website if you're ever interested in the programs that we do offer. If you just go there and click on programs, you can find this chart here and learn a little bit more about our programs. Our biggest thing, the way we've been working with the county, is our technical assistance. So we do offer technical assistance for landowners. If you're developing that stormwater management plan, you have no clue what you're doing, or where should I put a basin, or how should I plant the shoreline buffer? It's easier to talk about, but we can give you the recommendations of this is where I'd put it, or these are the native plants that we would suggest planting there, or trees, things like that. We do charge for our site visits. It's $100, but it allows us to spend the time with you on the property, going through that. What are your concerns, things like that. And also kind of writing a summary plan for you to hopefully be able to take and implement, either find a contractor or be able to do it yourself. Looking at a pollinator garden, things like that, we can offer that assistance So with our guidance, just like I was talking about, with those stormwater management plans, how to capture that runoff so that it's not going down the lake, things like that. But also, if you're interested in pollinators, I know that's been a big one of late. How do I do that? What do I plant? What attracts, what blooms at what time of year? Things like that. We can offer that guidance for you. And so with that, we also have cost share money available at times, I would say. Our current funding, I wouldn't say we have a lot of cost share dollars to play with this year, but we always encourage landowners to get their projects to us early so that if funding does come available, that we have your site visit done, we have a summary already ready for your project, so that when we do get funding to do things like this, that we are ready to go on your project, I would say. 2020 was a pretty busy year for us, so we spent a lot of our 2021 cost share. I think we have about $500 left for cost share money for projects. So if you have maybe a small project or things like that, we certainly might be able to fund. We usually go up to 50% on a project, sometimes less, depending on the funding we have left. But these are things that we could help you implement: a shoreline buffer or a rain garden, things like that. But I would say right now funding is pretty limited, but always get your projects to us earlier than waiting till last minute and then want your project done right away in the spring. So if you get it on our radar, then when we have funding, we can help cost share on those projects. So this would be just an example of a shoreline project, kind of a site plan of how to do a shoreline project. These would be something after that site visit we'd be able to work up for you. Is this is what where you should plant, this is what you should plant, and it just helps ease of landowner who maybe not has all of that knowledge, that we can kind of assist with that. So also another big program that we're doing conservation easements. So these are they're payments to the landowner to not develop their property. Generally, you have to have 20 acres or bigger, and you can receive 60% of the land value as like a one-time payment. And we do have quite a few programs that we are currently working with. So the newest one is the Pine Leach Watershed Rim Program, as well as we have the Mississippi program. So if you're a landowner that has, that 20 acres or bigger, and you're interested in, preserving that area, and you are within that region, even if you're not, just always give us a call, let us know you're interested. We can talk to you about the program, but you can also find it on our website as well and look into it a little bit more. I'm not going to show you all of our boundary maps and things like that because that's just going to get too confusing. But if you're interested, always just give us a call and let us know. Another program that we have it's called the LCCMR program. And this also is cost share to, forest landowners. That our newest one is going to kick off July 1st of this year, and it's going to look at doing prescribed fire as well as getting a forest stewardship plan for your property. If you're interested in doing a tree planting, things like that, we might have money to be able to pay for that. And if following in this boundary of the Camp Ripley area here. So if you're a landowner in that area and you're interested in doing any of those things, please let us know. So another thing we've been working on with Crow Wing County as well as the Soil and Water is we're working on these what's called one watershed, one plans. And so this is for the Pine River area. It just got completed. If you haven't ever seen the document, if you just Google search Pine River One Watershed One Plan, this is allowing more money to come into the area to do conservation projects like tree plantings and shoreline buffers, and it has a priority focus. So if you fall in one of those priority areas, but if you're interested in doing a project, just please let us know. And if you fall in this area, there could be a good chance that you could receive funding. Another big task that we do here at the Soil and Water is, water sampling. So we'll be doing water sampling this year on some of the streams in the area, looking at, the health of these streams and what's coming into them. So we do that through the MPCA. And we've been doing that for quite a few years now, and we're getting some good data on stream health and things like that. Another big thing that we've kind of been working on this year, we actually did get a Green Corps member, and her name is Bethany. She's been awesome, and she's been really kicking off our chloride education for the Soil and Water. And she got this going this year. This is through the Isaac Walton League, and it's looking at these chloride test strips and looking at, before it snows and then after it snows, what is the chloride concentration and how does that change in these streams or lakes or things like that. So that's a really cool, exciting thing, but we've also been trying to do some more chloride education, trying to keep chloride and like salt and things like that from getting into our lakes and streams and causing impacts of that. So if you're looking for more information, always feel free to give us a call. We are back open now, and so somebody's always here. So if you're more comfortable stopping in and talking to us in person, absolutely feel free to do that. Otherwise, please give us a call or check out our website for more information if you're interested in doing some sort of project or things like that. So, and that is all I got.
Wow, thanks, Adam. That was great. Really appreciate the information. And I know there's 22 people in this meeting, but again, we're going to try and find ways to get this presentation. It's being recorded out so that we can share this with our partners so that we can get a lot more people viewing this and maybe separate it into chapters. So if they just want to focus on SWCD's message at the end, they can skip right to it. But really appreciate your help. I will echo something I should have said earlier in the presentation. Soil and Water Conservation District is really a go-to for technical advice for on-the-ground projects, especially stormwater management plan assistance and restoration. That's where I know on a consistent basis where we deal with property owners that are having issues out there that we can work with Soil and Water to assist. We also are huge partners on water planning, but more of the focus on this one happens to be land use. So with that, does anybody else on the call or in this Teams meeting have any other questions about anything they've heard about, or any questions before we wrap this up for this session? All right. Well, I think that'll do it. I hope everyone enjoys the weekend. Looked like our best weather day was yesterday. But I do think as we move through the week here towards next weekend, we're going to start getting into those upper 50s and 60s. Enjoy the Brainerd Lakes area for those of you that are coming back. Our contact information is, I will leave that up on the screen. And leave you with that. You can always call us 824-1010, landservices@crowing.us, or our website. We're happy to help. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day. Thank you.